She didn't walk down the aisle like a bride, she walked like a girl being sentenced. Under soft lights and white flowers, Dominic stood cold and unreadable, the perfect king of a brutal empire. But Serafina, pale in her wedding dress, looked less like a wife and more like a sacrifice. Every trembling breath, every flinch, every terrified glance screamed the same truth. This wasn't romance, it was a tragedy in slow motion. And when Dominic noticed that fear, he understood something devastating. He hadn't married a woman, he had inherited her nightmare.
Dominic Varley's empire was a construct of calculated terror and arrangements finalized in blood. He yielded no ground until the moment his bride physically recoiled from his touch. This union was architected as a pure transaction: execute the contract, solidify the alliance, and acquire the asset. But Serafina Vale was not the commodity he had anticipated. She was a sacrificial offering led to a ceremonial slaughter. As this reality penetrated Dominic's consciousness, he confronted a paradigm-shifting choice: to claim what the agreement afforded him, or to dismantle the very architecture of his ruthless existence. It was a decision destined to shatter them both, and we are here to analyze the wreckage. The Armory Club served as a permanent lesion on the soul of Lower Manhattan, a wound that refused to close. Within its dark wood and crimson velvet confines, it operated as a crucible for men whose ambitions could not survive the light of day. At its center stood Dominic Varley, his drink untouched, his gaze absorbing everything. He had held dominion over this club for 6 years, and over most of its patrons for far longer. "You seem coiled," observed Marcus Chen, Dominic's oldest confidant and the perennial voice of his conscience. "A significant evening." "It is merely a signature." Dominic's reply was devoid of inflection. "Indistinguishable from any other contract, though this one specifies a wife." Dominic offered no reply. The marital contract itself had been a grueling 3-month campaign of attrition. The Vale dynasty governed shipping lanes across 5 strategic ports, arteries essential for Dominic's planned expansion. Serafina's father, Aldo Vale, facing financial ruin, had offered his own daughter as living collateral. It was a cold, methodical gambit. Marcus studied him. "Have you ever properly met this Serafina?" "Once. 2 years prior at some philanthropic event." Dominic searched his memory for a face and found only a vague impression. "She was silent." "And yet you proceed." "I am securing a tactical advantage. The woman is simply a provision within the agreement." The justification felt hollow, even to himself. Yet Dominic had founded his entire reality upon such brutal arithmetic. For him, emotion was a systemic flaw. Affection represented a liability to be exploited by one's enemies. A severe doctrine instilled by a father who treated his children as instruments and viewed love as a terminal weakness. The club door swung open. Aldo Vale entered, flanked by his 2 most loyal retainers, their faces etched with age and desperation. Aldo appeared diminished since their last encounter, his fine suit hanging from a frame shrunken by anxiety. "Varley." Aldo's grip was disproportionately strong, a transparent effort to project a power he no longer possessed. "All is in order. Serafina is upstairs. My legal counsel approved the contract this morning." The smile fixed upon Aldo's face was vacant, his eyes betraying no warmth. "You will possess full control of the shipping lanes within 48 hours, and Serafina, she has been briefed on her obligations." Something in that phrasing unsettled Dominic, a discordance he chose to ignore. "Then our transaction is complete." "Almost." Aldo indicated the private lift. "The rite begins in 20 minutes, a modest affair as we agreed, only immediate family." Dominic gave a curt, decisive nod. He had mandated discretion. The less ceremony involved, the easier it was to classify this as a purely commercial exchange. The lift ascended through a dense, oppressive silence. As the doors parted, Dominic entered a space that felt utterly incongruous. The Armory's penthouse had been contorted into a grotesque facsimile of a wedding chapel. White florals and muted lighting cast a sterile glow upon perfectly aligned chairs. The scattered guests fell silent at Dominic's arrival. He saw Victor, his chief of security, near the windows, and his Aunt Teresa, the sole relative he permitted in his life, regarding him with an expression of profound pity. The others were Vales, their kin and associates, all staring at Dominic with poorly masked dread. Excellent. Dread induced predictability. An older woman, presumably Aldo's wife, approached. "Mr. Varelli, I am Catherine Vale. We met once long ago." "Mrs. Vale." Dominic's acknowledgement was perfunctory. "Serafina will be present shortly." "She is simply—" Catherine's hands were twisted together. "She is somewhat agitated. This has been a rapid development for her." "We are all aware of the nature of this arrangement." Dominic's voice was like ice. "I trust she comprehends her responsibilities." Catherine winced. "She understands her duty." That term again. Duty. It settled in Dominic's gut like a dense, cold stone, an unwelcome sensation he could not name. Marcus materialized with 2 flutes of champagne. "To the joyous union," he murmured, his inflection deliberately neutral. He extended one to Dominic, who placed it on a table, untouched. "Where is the officiant?" "Judge Morrison is present, a favor to Aldo," Marcus replied, his voice low. "Are you certain of this course? It is not too late to—" "It is concluded," Dominic interrupted. "The contract is executed. Contracts can be nullified." Dominic turned sharply on his friend. "Why do you resist me in this?" "Because in the 20 years I have known you, I have never witnessed you so profoundly detached from a situation. And that is a significant statement." Marcus held his gaze unwavering. "This is not the transfer of product or the acquisition of territory. This is a human being. A human being who consented to the terms." "Did she?" Marcus countered softly. "Or did her father consent on her behalf?" Before Dominic could formulate a response, the atmosphere in the room shifted. His gaze locked onto a doorway down the hall, and for a moment, his own respiration ceased. Serafina Vale stood there, an ethereal figure utterly unlike the indistinct memory he held. 2 years before, she was an anonymous figure in a crowded venue, inconsequential. Now she was enveloped in a simple white gown that, instead of appearing elegant, seemed to consume her. Her dark hair was drawn back from a face so pallid it was nearly translucent. But it was her eyes that arrested him. They were reservoirs of pure, unmediated terror. It was not a fear of him, but a fear of the very space she occupied. Her gaze darted, the frantic search of a trapped creature seeking an exit. Her hands were crushing a small bouquet, her knuckles stark white. As Catherine moved to adjust her gown, Serafina flinched with such violence that the room was plunged into absolute silence. This was not a bride experiencing pre-ceremonial nerves. This was an exhibition of profound, systemic panic. A tectonic shift occurred deep within Dominic, an instinct he immediately sought to suppress. This was the transaction. The woman understood the terms. Her fear was her own burden to manage. And yet, as Aldo seized her arm to guide her down the aisle, Serafina faltered. Her father's grip became a vice, pulling her forward with a brutal jerk, and Dominic saw her bite her lip until a bead of blood appeared. A violent tremor coursed through her entire frame. The ceremony itself was a featureless haze. Judge Morrison recited words meant to grant this coercive theater a veneer of legitimacy. Dominic delivered his own lines in a flat monotone. When the judge addressed Serafina, the ensuing silence stretched into an eternity. Her voice fractured completely. She attempted again. I do. It was the sound of absolute capitulation. The judge declared them wed. He was meant to kiss her. But as Dominic approached, Serafina averted her face so violently his lips met only her cheek. Her body was rigid, like stone. A weak, obligatory applause rippled through the room. Aldo radiated triumph. Catherine appeared devastated. Marcus looked poised to speak words he would later regret. And Serafina, she seemed on the verge of dissolving into dust. The reception that followed was mercifully brief, as Dominic had forbidden dancing, cake, and any other matrimonial pretense. The result was an hour of stilted dialogue amid untouched refreshments, while Serafina remained fixed in a chair against the wall, an unapproachable island of silent misery. He observed her from afar. She had been motionless for 20 minutes, speaking to no one. Her mother had made one attempt, whispering something that caused Serafina's eyes to fill with tears she steadfastly refused to shed. She is terrified of you, Victor materialized beside him. She has no knowledge of me. Perhaps that is precisely the issue. Victor had served Dominic for 15 years and had earned the privilege of candor. You are aware of the narratives that circulate about you, the mythology. Rumors do not concern me. They ought to. Particularly when your wife regards you as her executioner. Dominic's jaw clenched. She will acclimate. Will she? Victor's question hung in the air, thick with skepticism. Or will she merely learn to endure her suffering in silence? Before Dominic could respond, Aldo appeared, wearing a politician's smile and the unfocused eyes of an inebriate. Well, Varelli, my felicitations. I am confident you will provide my daughter with excellent care. The phrasing, as if Serafina were a prize automobile he had just sold, ignited a cold fury in Dominic's core. The shipping lanes are yours as of tomorrow. At this, Aldo's grin broadened. The paperwork is prepared. You will have full operational authority by noon, and Serafina, well, she is accompanied by her own manual of operations. Her father, Aldo, presents her not as a daughter, but as a finished product, perfectly engineered for submission. He speaks of her wifely obligations as pre-programmed functions, a testament to her mother's rigorous conditioning. A current of revulsion surges through Dominic, his hands tightening. His curt dismissal, "Our business is done," is an attempt to sever the transaction, but Aldo's laughter confirms its finality. As the older man departs, Dominic is gripped by a violent, primal impulse. His lieutenant, Victor, offers a futile plea for restraint. "Boss, give her a second." But Dominic's retort, "I know what this is," rings hollow. For the first time, he is an architect surveying a blueprint he no longer comprehends. He had envisioned a partner in this violent chess game, a woman forged in the same crucible of brutality. He received a terrified girl whose gaze cast him as the monster of her nightmares, a reflection he found disturbingly accurate. As the evening's facade crumbled, the well wishes of his guests morphed into thinly veiled condolences. Marcus, a figure of grim pragmatism, delivered his final verdict in a low growl. "I am only saying this once. That girl is shattered by fear. Your intentions for tonight are not your concern. They become my concern when I witness choices that carve permanent scars." Marcus's stare was unyielding. You secured the shipping lanes. You have won. Do not pulverize her soul simply because you possess the power to do so. Even monsters like us observe lines we do not cross. Leave. Marcus's departure was an unspoken judgment, leaving a void in the hall. Soon, only Dominic, Serafina, and Victor remained. Sensing the suffocating tension, Victor retreated under the guise of security. A profound, crushing silence descended. Serafina sat petrified, her focus fixed on the gold band on her finger, a shackle Dominic had chosen with transactional indifference. Her breath was a frantic, shallow rhythm. Dominic advanced cautiously, as one would approach a cornered creature. It is time to go. His voice was a violation, making her flinch as she rose on legs that barely supported her. She refused to meet his gaze, perhaps because she no longer could. His black Mercedes waited outside, an idling monument to power and control. Victor held the door, and Serafina plunged into the back seat, pressing herself against the far window. Dominic followed, the door sealing shut with the finality of a vault's lock. They traversed Manhattan, suspended in absolute silence. The city's lights bled across her face, revealing the glistening tracks of tears she no longer tried to conceal. It was the face of utter capitulation. "Serafina," his voice shattered the quiet, causing her to jump. "Look at me." With agonizing slowness, she obeyed. Her eyes met his for the first time since the ceremony, and the sheer void within them struck him with physical force. It was not merely fear but resignation, a chilling acceptance of the horror she believed was imminent. "I will not harm you." The words were empty air, powerless against her conditioning. "Do you understand? I understand my purpose," she interrupted, her voice a brittle whisper. "My mother made it clear. I know what is required." The dead, robotic cadence of her speech coiled in his gut. "What precisely did your mother say?" "That I am yours now, that I must." Her words faltered, her breath catching. "That my purpose is to obey your commands, that it is my duty to please you, never resist, to be—" Her voice shattered. "To be good." A cold fury, aimed not at her, but at Aldo and her mother, surged within Dominic. They had reduced her to a line item in a contract, indoctrinating her that obedience was her sole value. "They informed you that you are my property. Is that correct?" Her terrified gaze remained locked on his. "You purchased me." My father presented the agreement. "You receive the shipping lanes, and you receive me. My family is safe. That is the deal, Serafina. I am no fool, Mr. Barley." Tears now streamed down her cheeks. "I understand what men of your world do. I have heard the stories. I know your nature, and I know I am without choice. Therefore, I will perform my duties. I will be whatever you require." Her voice then fractured into a raw, desperate plea. "Just please, do not inflict more pain than is necessary." The car halted before Dominic's building, a monolith of dark glass and steel. He typically viewed it with pride. Tonight it felt like a dungeon. Victor opened her door. Serafina emerged on trembling legs, and as Dominic's hand brushed her elbow, she recoiled with such violence she nearly fell. They ascended in the private elevator, encased in a suffocating quiet. Serafina's eyes were fixed on the floor, marking each second of this final walk. The doors parted to reveal his living space, a stark expanse of concrete, brick, and glass overlooking the Hudson. It was an environment engineered to intimidate. Through her eyes, Dominic saw only its soulless coldness. She remained at the threshold, a statue carved from pure dread. The bedrooms are in that direction, Dominic gestured. Your belongings are in the closet, she responded with a minuscule, silent nod. Are you hungry? I can arrange for something. Another silent affirmation. She offered nothing. Frustration began to crest within Dominic. He navigated deadly negotiations, yet nothing had prepared him for this shattered girl who saw a fiend in his reflection. Perhaps she was only seeing the truth. Serafina! He attempted to soften his tone, but the words emerged sharp. You must eat. You barely touched your food. I am not hungry, she replied, her voice an empty echo. When did you last eat? Silence was her only response. Serafina. Yesterday morning, she conceded, her voice lifeless. I could not. I have felt ill since learning of the arrangement. Food, just... She wrapped her arms around herself. It is of no consequence. I am well. She was the antithesis of well. A violent tremor racked her frame, her teeth chattering. As Dominic moved toward her, she scrambled backward until her back met the wall. Raw, animal panic flared in her eyes. He froze, raising his hands, palms outward. I am not going to touch you. But you will, she whispered, fresh tears falling. It is meant to happen. That is the purpose of tonight, is it not? The contract, it specifies. She choked at the word. Consummation. Dominic articulated the word she could not, and he watched her recoil from its sound. So, that is what you believe this to be. And there it was, the cold, unspoken bedrock of their union. Their marriage contract contained clauses regarding heirs and duties, obligations to be met regardless of consent. Dominic had barely glanced at them, dismissing them as archaic formalities. He had operated under the assumption that Serafina was a strategist who understood the game, possessing her own agenda. He had never anticipated this degree of pure, soul-level terror. He had never expected to feel like a predator circling its prey. Go to your room, he commanded at last. Take a shower, change. I will have food delivered to you. And afterward? Her voice was a ghost. Afterward, you will eat and you will sleep. That is all. She remained unconvinced. My mother insisted the first night. It is vital that we are obligated to. The trembling intensified. She warned that if I fail, my father will lose everything, that you can nullify the pact, that our family will be... Your mother is misinformed. Dominic's voice cut sharper than he intended. Go to the bedroom, Serafina. Now. She vanished, the door clicking shut. Dominic stood alone in his cavernous living room, battling an urge to demolish something. The entire arrangement, the deal, the wedding, this union, had appeared so simple on paper. Acquire the shipping routes, forge an alliance, take a wife, consolidate power. He had never once accounted for the bride being a person. His phone vibrated. It was Marcus. So, how is married life treating you? The question was a provocation. Not so bad. Dominic moved to the window. She is afraid of me, genuinely terrified. She believes I am going to... He could not complete the thought. And are you? Marcus shot back. For God's sake, Marcus. I ask because you signed a document granting you that right, and I know your methods. Everything is a lever. Everyone is a pawn. So, as a friend, what is your next play? Dominic closed his eyes. I do not know. You had better determine it, and quickly, because that girl is not a footnote in a contract. She is a human being. If you treat her as property, you will shatter her and perhaps yourself. Since when did you become my moral arbiter? Since I watched you transform into someone I barely recognize over the last 5 years. You once had principles you would not betray. Dom, ensure this does not become one of them. Marcus disconnected. Dominic ordered food he was certain Serafina would not touch. Upon its arrival, he tapped on her door. No response. Serafina, I have left food out here for you. You need to eat. Still, only silence answered. He waited, hearing only the apartment's sterile quiet, then retreated. An hour later, he checked again. The tray was undisturbed. Dominic passed the night in his office, poring over memorized reports, anything to escape the reality of the terrified girl in his home. As dawn broke, he was no closer to a solution. When he departed, the penthouse descended into a tomb-like silence. Her door remained sealed. The meal he had left was gone, but whether it was consumed or discarded remained a mystery. His day was a brutal gauntlet. Lawyers, security briefings with Victor, and the evisceration of a supplier. Dominic performed his role with cold precision, but his focus was fractured. That evening, he discovered Serafina in the kitchen. Dressed in jeans and an oversized sweater, she appeared impossibly young. Her hair was still damp as she made a fumbling attempt to prepare a meal. Her movements were hesitant, uncertain. You do not need to do that. His voice sliced through the quiet, and she jolted violently. The knife clattered against the counter. I have staff for that. I wanted to, she murmured, her eyes fixed on the mangled vegetables. I felt I should. My mother said it is my duty to— Your mother was mistaken about many things. Serafina could only twist her hands. I do not understand what you require of me. As Dominic drew nearer, she recoiled, using the island as a defensive barrier, always fearful, always in retreat. I need you to stop seeing a monster. I am trying, she whispered, her voice on the verge of breaking. Indeed, I am trying, but I am lost. I have no understanding of my function here. She concealed her face. This world is entirely unknown. I don't know the mechanics of being a wife or what you require. My fear is that I will fail, and you will— I will what? I have no idea. The admission erupted from her. I don't know your response to my failure. Will you cast me out? Will you inflict harm? There are no established protocols, only this consuming dread, this enclosure. I cannot draw a breath. Her words devolved into a full-scale panic attack, each frantic inhalation causing her to falter. He acted on sheer impulse, moving toward her, but her retreat was so violent she collided with the counter. Do not touch me, she shrieked. I beg you, don't! I am unable. She collapsed to the floor, folding herself against the cabinetry, fighting for oxygen. It was a total psychological collapse, her entire being overwhelmed by terror. Dominic stood frozen, a spectator to her disintegration, feeling profoundly impotent. Every fiber of his being demanded he seize control to nullify her agony. But he was the catalyst. One cannot command away this kind of primal fear. Serafina. His voice was quiet, deliberate. Look at me. I require you to open your eyes. But she was incapable. They were clenched shut, tears tracing paths down her face as she trembled. I will make no physical contact. I am remaining in this spot. You are secure. Do you understand me? You are secure. I am not, she forced out between gasps. I will never be secure. I belong to you. My father bartered me and you acquired me. I have no options, no escape. I cannot breathe. Dominic carefully lowered himself to the floor, maintaining a significant distance. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. Mirror my actions. He demonstrated, his breathing slow and measured. After a moment, she attempted to mimic him. A long interval passed before her breathing began to stabilize, before the panic receded even slightly. I apologize. Her gaze was fixed on the floor. I am deeply sorry. I was not supposed to. I was instructed to be silent, to be compliant, to avoid conflict, but I'm failing. The apologies continued to spill from her. But Serafina. He held the silence until she finally met his eyes. What, precisely, were you told about me? She gnawed on her lip. That you are a dangerous man, that you have taken lives, that the entire city fears you, that you invariably obtain your desires regardless of the cost, that if I am unable to— She hesitated. If you are unable to do what? If I fail to provide you with contentment, you could destroy my family. The agreement grants you dominion over them. It is my responsibility to ensure this arrangement succeeds. A sharp, frigid anger ignited within Dominic. Aldo had weaponized his own daughter's terror, conditioning her to believe her sole purpose was to appease a monster. Your family manipulated you, he stated, his tone incisive. They forced you into an impossible position and labeled it your duty. They convinced you that you were their savior. That is not protection, Serafina. That is cowardice. They were without options. We were on the verge of losing everything. My father's debts, the legal troubles, the threats from— She stopped, aware she had revealed too much. From whom? She simply shook her head. Serafina, who was issuing threats against your family? It is irrelevant now. You controlled the shipping lanes. You can shield us from anyone who— Again, she fell silent. For Dominic, the puzzle was assembling itself into an ugly picture. Her father was not merely insolvent. He had formidable enemies, and rather than confronting them, he had hidden behind his daughter. He sought to protect us. He was protecting himself. Do not, she trembled. Please do not say that. He is still my father. He is still— She could not articulate the rest. They both understood. Aldo Valle had sacrificed his child to preserve his own existence, cloaking the act in the language of honor and love. What is your age? The question was abrupt. 22. And this entire arrangement, how long has it been in motion? I am uncertain. Several months. I was only informed 2 weeks ago. She drew her knees in tighter. My mother detailed everything. The debts, the threats, the marriage contract. She said this was the only solution, my obligation as the eldest. You have siblings? 2 younger sisters still in their schooling. A new flame appeared in her eyes, one of pure defense. They cannot know. They believe I am marrying out of choice, because it is— She uttered a bitter laugh. A romance. And what is their understanding of you? Nothing of substance. Only that you are successful and formidable. My mother fabricated a nearly respectable narrative. Serafina wiped at her eyes with her sleeve. They have no concept of your true enterprise, of what you truly are. And what am I? She looked directly at him, and through her gaze, Dominic saw himself reflected. The architect of a violent dynasty, a conqueror, a figure universally feared, a man who had just purchased a terrorized young woman for her strategic value. I don't know, she whispered. That is the most terrifying element. I don't know what you are, what you desire, or what you will do. I only know that there is no exit. The statement lingered between them, a cold, immutable truth. Dominic rose slowly. Stand up. Fear registered in her eyes, but she complied, rising on unsteady legs. Return to the bedroom. Please, Serafina, go to your room. Lock the door. I will occupy the guest room. He retrieved his phone. I am ordering sustenance, proper food, not what that was. It will be left outside your door. You will consume all of it. Then you will sleep. That is all. No duties, no contract, no expectations. Merely sleep. Is that understood? She nodded, almost imperceptibly, as if she could not process the command. Tomorrow we will discuss the actual terms of this arrangement, the rules. But tonight your only task is to rest. He paused for a moment. Are you capable of that? I believe so. Good. Now go. And she departed. This time, the sound of the lock was not one of submission. It was one of reprieve. Dominic ordered enough food for 3 people, selecting items he hoped she might find palatable. He placed it at her door and knocked once. He heard her retrieve it 20 minutes later. An hour passed. He checked, and the tray was gone. A minor victory. He remained in the guest room, fixated on the ceiling, reevaluating every decision. The transaction was complete. The shipping routes were secured. He had acquired the prize, or so he had believed. What he had actually obtained was a fractured young woman sold to preserve a coward. The entire agreement now cast him in a more villainous light than any of his previous actions. This marriage felt less like a strategic acquisition and more like a shared incarceration. And across the hall, Serafina was undoubtedly awake, dreading the morning, interpreting his kindness as a mere prelude to a more insidious form of cruelty. His empire was founded on his ability to read people, to exploit their vulnerabilities, to take what he desired. But to be the very source of another's absolute terror had never been his objective. He had never intended to become the monster in a young woman's psyche. The question was whether he could now embody something else. Or was he too far gone, a man whose benevolence was indistinguishable from another weapon? There were no solutions, only a proliferation of questions in the silence. He was left with the grim awareness that he had not purchased an asset. He had purchased a human being's paralyzing fear. And for the first time, Dominic Varley held total dominion over another person and had no idea how to wield it. Morning arrived with unwelcome speed. Sleep offered Dominic no respite. Only 2 hours of circular thinking before a bleak sunrise. By 6 o'clock, he was in the kitchen with coffee he had no desire for, absorbing the oppressive silence. He wondered if Serafina had managed to rest at all. Her door opened at 7:30. She had changed into dark jeans and a simple sweater, her hair contained. The exhaustion was etched on her face, yet she had composed herself into a fragile state of calm. Good morning? Her voice was subdued and formal. Morning. Dominic indicated the coffee. Would you like some? She shook her head, then reconsidered. Actually, yes, please. He poured her a cup, observing the tremor in her hands as she added cream and sugar. Her gaze was fixed on a point just past his shoulder, an active refusal of eye contact. He inquired if she had eaten. She responded with a clipped, "Yes, thank you," and flinched from the heat. She claimed it was excessive, then conceded she had consumed most of it. The kitchen island separated them like a demilitarized zone. The city was stirring outside, but within, the silence was a tangible waste. Then Dominic detonated the conversation. We need to speak. Genuinely this time. There would be no repeat of last night's fraught exchange. No more recitation of the script her parents had provided. Only the unvarnished, brutal truth. Serafina's knuckles whitened around her mug. All right, He instructed her to sit, and she chose a chair at the furthest possible remove. Her every instinct was geared toward an escape route. Dominic remained standing, pacing like a predator in an enclosure. I will ask questions, and you will provide direct answers. Understood. I will attempt to. Then he delivered the critical strike. Did you desire this marriage? And there it was, a small, defeated exhalation. No. She had wanted none of this. Her father had leveraged guilt with an expert hand, speaking of debts and unseen dangers, framing this as the sole path to the family's salvation. He had constructed a reality where her refusal would brand her the architect of their ruin. And her mother? Her mother had provided a chilling tutorial on wifely obligations and his presumed demands. She had made it unequivocally clear that should Serafina fail to satisfy him, all of them would suffer the consequences. A cold fury began to coalesce in Dominic once more. Your parents commodified you, then blamed you for the transaction. They were in a desperate situation, she whispered. They were cowards. She attempted to defend them, but he dismissed the notion. They used you as a living barricade, Serafina. That is not an act of love. She retorted, What could you possibly know of love? And instantly flinched at her own audacity. He kept his voice steady. I know nothing of it, but I recognize the form of exploitation, and your father used you as collateral against his own failures. Serafina rises with such force the chair shrieks against the floor. You fail to grasp the context. My family was disintegrating. My father was living under a direct threat. She was presented with a narrative where she could be the savior, the fulcrum to restore balance. What response was I supposed to give? A refusal? And Dominic, with the cold precision of a surgeon, counters without a moment's hesitation. Yes, the correct response was no. The correct response was to allow your father to resolve his own catastrophic failures. She scoffs. A simple edict from your position. You command all the influence. I was bound by duty. She is fully invested in the architecture of her own martyrdom. With 2 sisters to shield and a legacy to preserve? What sort of aberration would I be to simply abandon them? He posits. Perhaps a person who recognizes the value of her own existence. But she is captive to her conditioning. My existence does not outweigh theirs. The declaration hangs in the air, a stark thesis of self-negation. Dominic is observing a woman who has been systematically taught that love is an act of erasure. When he inquires as to the source of this doctrine, she replies, It required no author. It is an axiomatic truth. As Dominic closes the distance between them, she instinctively recoils. He halts, raising his hands in a gesture of placation. I have no intention of touching you, but you must listen. It is then that he reveals the narrative's true, brutal architecture. Your father did not merely secure protection, he orchestrated a transaction. Your life exchanged for his profit. He details the grim calculus, the shipping routes valued in the millions, the strategic alliance, the consolidation of territory. Her father did not escape debt, Serafina. He achieved wealth through your commodification. She winces, her mind rejecting the foundational betrayal. He bartered you for $3 million and a guaranteed revenue stream, he states. This is not the act of a desperate man. This is the execution of a business strategy. Serafina collapses back into the chair, her physical structure failing her. He produces his phone, presenting the contract file. You can review it. Page 14, Section 7, the terms of payment. She regards the device as if it were a serpent poised to strike before finally taking it. Her gaze sweeps across the text, and one can pinpoint the precise moment her reality fractures. Her expression simply dissolves. "Stop," she utters, pushing the phone away. "Do not offer an apology. You have merely exposed the truth." Yet new tears trace paths down her face. This is no longer the texture of fear. This is the unadulterated expression of grief. It is the death of the singular belief that had structured her sacrifice. "He sold me," she verbalizes, the words making it real. "As if I were property, as if I were a void." A broken laugh escapes her. "My own father assigned me a market value. That seems to be the very definition of a void." And for the first time, Dominic is left without a response. Aldo had converted his own child into a line item on a ledger, and Dominic was the counterparty to the transaction. "I was not aware," he says, the words feeling hollow. "At the time of signing, my understanding was that you were a willing participant in this arrangement." "And what is your understanding now?" "Now I understand you were coerced. I understand you are living in terror. And I understand that none of this is a burden you should carry." The contract, however, remains a binding instrument. He then deploys another revelation. This contract possesses a dissolution clause. Her gaze snaps toward him. For a single fleeting moment, a glimmer of hope illuminates her features, and just as quickly it is extinguished. "My sisters. What becomes of their fate? The individuals who threaten my father will not recognize a nullified agreement." Her departure would place her family back in the path of that danger. And so, she makes her determination. She will remain. "You would choose to remain in a union you despise solely to shield your siblings?" "They are 8 and 10 years old." Her resolve is absolute. "They are not deserving of this outcome. So yes, I will remain. I will fulfill every stipulation this contract requires of me. I only ask for your promise that they will be kept from harm." An observable shift occurs within him. He comprehends the mechanics of her trap. She is caught in an impossible dilemma. To leave is to condemn her sisters. To stay is to self-destruct. It is a perfect checkmate. And then he speaks. "What if a third path exists? What if you were to stay, but we were to amend the terms?" She is disoriented. "Amend them in what manner?" Dominic carefully outlines the revised arrangement. The legal document binds them in marriage, but it makes no stipulation that she must exist in a state of fear. "We can transmute this into something tolerable." The meaning of this is clarified. He will not compel her to do anything. There will be no performance of wifely duties. She will reside in his home. They will maintain the public facade, and her family will remain protected. Behind the veneer of their life, however, she will be free. That term, free, sounds like a concept from an entirely different language. "I find that difficult to believe," she says. "I know," he concedes. Her eyes analyze his expression, searching for the hidden clause, the inevitable deception. "What is your motive in this? What is the hidden cost?" He enumerates the strategic benefits, the tactical gains, and then he pauses. "And perhaps an opportunity to sleep without being haunted." She remains unconvinced. "You do not present as a man who is troubled by his decisions." "I never have been," he confesses. "But witnessing your collapse last night, that was not a moment I would count as a victory." "You experienced regret. I experienced my own monstrosity." "Perhaps that is what you are," she observes, as if stating a simple fact. "Or perhaps we are both merely prisoners of this same mechanism." "Perhaps." Against the low, rhythmic pulse of the city beyond, they began the work of redesigning her cage. I will require certain assurances. Serafina's voice was now a solid thing, the tremor gone. If my role is to remain here, I must have certainty of my sister's safety, not a pledge, but an established fact. Consider it done. They will be assigned a security detail, unseen but absolute. And my father's obligation, the men who were threatening him, as of yesterday, his creditors are now my employees. To reach him, they must first pass through me. Dominic's voice lowered, becoming intimate. Your sisters are untouchable. Your family is now an asset under my protection, regardless of your father's merit. In the $3 million he was paid? Yes, what of it? Is it possible for you to reclaim it, to ensure he loses it? One of Dominic's eyebrows arched. And for what reason would you desire that outcome? Because he cannot be allowed to profit from my commodification. He cannot be permitted to believe he executed some masterstroke of strategy. Her voice became glacial. He must be made to understand the authentic cost of his action. And in that moment, Dominic perceived it, the core of steel she had been conditioned to conceal but had never truly lost. I can facilitate that, but it will decimate your family's financial standing. Excellent. Let him endure it. Let him discover the true meaning of desperation rather than liquidating me as an asset. For the first time, she met his gaze directly, unflinching and absolute. I will serve as the sacrifice for my sisters, but my father will not build his fortune upon it. Regard it as handled, truly, with such simplicity, with such simplicity. Dominic produced his phone, dispatching a message to his legal team. By day's end, that $3 million will be converted into a loan with punitive interest rates. He will come to curse the day he ever saw that money. A dark, grim satisfaction flickered across Serafina's face. Thank you. Do not thank me. I am still the man whose contract holds you captive. But you are also the one rendering this cage habitable. She held her coffee cup as if it were an anchor, and that is not an insignificant thing. The silence that descended between them was altered. No longer a battleground, but a highly fragile armistice. I have several inquiries, Serafina stated softly. Regarding you, this ecosystem, the world I have now been integrated into. Proceed. The rumors that circulate about you, do they possess validity? That is contingent on the content of the whispers. That you have taken lives, that you preside over a criminal enterprise, that you are a man defined by danger. Dominic was faced with a choice between a comforting falsehood and the brutal honesty he had offered her. Yes, all of those things are true. She absorbed the confession without a visible reaction. What is the number? The number of lives I have taken? Yes. Are you certain you want that figure? I am cohabitating with you. I am bound to you. I believe I am entitled to understand the man with whom I am trapped. A valid point. I ceased counting after the initial few. A number of them were in self-defense. Some were a function of business, some... His voice trailed off. Some were simply because I was consumed by anger or to establish a principle. At times it was merely the most efficient solution to a problem. Do you harbor regrets? The question seemed to catch him entirely off guard. For some of them, for those who were not deserving, for those who were merely in the wrong location at the wrong time, but not for all of them. No, not for all. Some individuals simply need to be removed from the equation. That remains true. Serafina fell silent for a moment. My father described you as ruthless. He claimed you constructed this entire empire on foundations of fear and violence. He presented it as a virtue. It is not a form of strength. It is a survival instinct that metastasized into a pathology. What is your meaning? Dominic rose and moved to the window, creating a significant distance between them. I was raised in an environment where weakness invited assault, where displaying emotion was tantamount to arming your adversary. The only path to viability was to be more resilient, more vicious, and more willing to commit terrible acts than any other. So that is what I became. And the strategy was effective. I survived. I built all of this. I transformed myself into the figure everyone feared, rather than the one who was being harmed. But at some point in that trajectory, survival evolved into conquest. Fear evolved into power, and I ceased to question the morality of an action and simply executed it because there was no one who could prevent me. Because no one possessed sufficient strength to obstruct my path? He turned back to face her. Your father's assessment was correct. I am ruthless, I am dangerous, and the acts I have committed would compel you to flee this room if you had any sanctuary to which you could run. I am not running. It would likely be the rational course of action. But I am not. She stood and approached the window, maintaining a careful distance. Would you like to know my interpretation? What? I believe you are articulating all of this to intimidate me, to ensure I comprehend the monstrous scale of your identity so that I will. What? Cower? Behave? Understand my subordinate position. She shook her head. But here's the reality of the situation. I have already reached the apex of terror. It cannot escalate further, so perhaps you can dispense with the performance and simply reveal who you actually are. Dominic remained silent, observing. The woman who, a mere night ago, trembled so intensely she could barely stand, was now challenging his authority with a chilling composure. You possess a depth I had clearly underestimated. My father perceived me as an ornate object, mute and valuable only as a bargaining chip. Yet I am not unintelligent. I have spent a lifetime as a silent observer learning from the periphery. She drew her arms around her torso. So do not condescend to me as if I am some sheltered child. I understand your nature. I perceive this world for precisely what it represents. I am merely attempting to discern the principles of survival within it. A fair proposition. Dominic returned to his seat. Then we will proceed with truth, without theatrics. I forged my dominion through violence, for it is the sole currency I was ever taught to value. I excel at it, more than any person should, and I carry little remorse because the ecosystem in which I function offers no rewards for compassion. And yet, you are extending compassion to me. Am I? Or am I merely reluctant to add your name to the extensive catalog of things I have already laid to ruin? Does the distinction truly signify? I am uncertain. And this was the stark, unvarnished truth. Dominic could not fathom why Serafina's terror managed to breach his fortifications when all else had failed. He could not decipher why her fear resonated differently from that of his adversaries. He had no explanation for why the notion of compelling her to do anything felt tantamount to an eternal damnation of his own soul. They regarded one another across the expanse of the table, two figures ensnared by an arrangement neither desired, each searching for a path forward. What is our next move? Serafina at last fractured the quiet. Now, we devise a way to cohabitate within this space, without ensuring our mutual destruction. That constitutes the grand strategy. It constitutes the beginning of one. The remainder we will improvise as we proceed. The faintest ghost of a smile graced her lips. You do not strike me as the sort of man who improvises his way through life. Ordinarily, it is unnecessary. Most variables can be managed. This, he indicated the space between them. This is an uncharted map for us both. Indeed. The ensuing silence was altered. It was not yet comfortable, not yet serene, but it had ceased to be a battlefield. It was simply two individuals beginning to perceive the person behind the roles they had been compelled to inhabit. I must depart, Dominic announced, rising to his feet. Affairs that cannot be postponed. Victor will remain. Should you require anything, he will provide it. Victor, your chief of security? Correct. He has the appearance of a brute, but he is... Dominic paused. He is a decent man. You will be secure with him. Secure? She uttered the word as if sampling a foreign flavor for the first time. Understood. There is sustenance in the kitchen. Help yourself. The television is functional. Books are in the study. The gymnasium is on the second floor. This is your domain now as well. My domain. She scanned the immense penthouse as if truly apprehending it for the first time. I do not know how to occupy a domain. What are you referring to? For my entire existence, I have resided in my father's home, governed by my mother's edicts, performing the exact role they assigned me. I have never possessed a space that was solely my own, never experienced a single moment that was not orchestrated or monitored. Her gaze met his. I have no concept of how to simply exist without being directed. That admission struck him with a force for which he was entirely unprepared. Then you will acquire that knowledge. You now have the time, all the time in the world. And upon your return? Upon my return, we will share a meal. We will converse. We will continue to navigate this. He moved toward the door, then halted. Serafina, I was sincere in my words last night. I will not cause you harm, not in a physical sense, not ever. That is not what this is. Then what is it? To be frank, I am still endeavoring to ascertain that myself. He was gone before she could formulate a reply, the elevator doors sealing her in with her own look of uncertainty. As he descended, Dominic felt the staggering weight of his own declarations. He had made commitments he was not certain he could uphold. He had extended a form of grace he wasn't sure he possessed. He had made an attempt to be a person he had never been before. Victor awaited him in the lobby, leaning against a wall with folded arms. How did the situation unfold? She is aware of the financial transaction and of her father's role in it. What was her reaction? Better than I had any right to anticipate, and far worse than she ever should have been forced to endure. Dominic strode toward the exit. She is up there by herself. Maintain a watch over her, not too invasive, but confirm she is all right. You believe she will attempt to flee? I believe she might simply vanish in other ways. Just be gentle with your check-ins. Victor gave a nod of complete comprehension. What is our destination? We are going to have a conversation with Aldo. At last. A frigid smile stretched across Victor's features. Should I retrieve the instruments? Not on this occasion. This is merely a dialogue, but he must grasp that there will not be a second one. They traversed the city, moving through districts that shifted from affluent to industrial and back. Aldo's office was situated in Midtown, inside a skyscraper that reeked of old wealth, trying desperately to maintain its relevance. Dominic had visited this office previously when the initial deal was being negotiated. In that prior meeting, Aldo was all polished handshakes and gleaming promises. This encounter was destined to be different. The elevator ascended to the 14th floor. Aldo's secretary, an anxious woman in her 50s, made a feeble effort to obstruct them, but a single hard glance from Victor caused her to yield immediately. Aldo was in the middle of a laugh on a phone call as they burst in. That laughter died the moment he registered Dominic's expression. "I will have to call you back." The connection was terminated. "Dominic, I was not expecting you. I was under the impression we had concluded all matters." "We had. We are now addressing the revised terms." Dominic sank into a chair uninvited. Victor obstructed the doorway, a human monolith on guard. "I am not certain I follow. The 3 million you received for the sale of your own daughter, it now belongs to us." All color vanished from Aldo's face, only to flood back as an enraged, mottled crimson. "That is not negotiable. That money was stipulated in the contract. You are not able to simply, I am able to do precisely as I wish. Your only choice in this matter is whether we proceed amicably or with difficulty. The contract secured you the funds. It never guaranteed you would retain them." Dominic leaned back, projecting an air of complete indifference. "Consider it a loan that we are now collecting, a loan that carries a truly punishing rate of interest. This is nothing short of theft. No, this is commerce. Theft would involve me threatening your existence for the money. I am merely informing you of a modification to our agreement." Aldo rose, attempting to project an authority he no longer possessed. "I will contest this. I can pursue this legally. The contract is binding. You could make the attempt. But you must ask yourself, do you truly wish to wage a war with me over funds you acquired by treating your child like livestock?" Dominic's voice became as sharp as a razor. "Because I assure you, Aldo, you will not prevail in that conflict. You will not even survive it." The menace lingered in the atmosphere, heavy and suffocating. Aldo collapsed back into his chair, resembling a deflated balloon. "For what reason are you doing this?" The transaction was complete. Serafina consented. It was all concluded. Serafina did not consent. She was coerced. There is a profound difference. She was given a choice. She was given the semblance of a choice. That is not an equivalent. Dominic leaned forward. "You used your own child as a strategic piece and claimed it was for the family's sake. You frightened her into compliance by leveraging her sister's future. You allowed her to think she was rescuing everyone and when you were only rescuing yourself. And you profited from her sacrifice. I did what was necessary." "No, you did what was convenient. The action that allowed you to evade the repercussions of your own failings." Dominic stood. "The money is forfeit. My representatives will contact yours regarding a repayment schedule. You will be settling this debt for the next 10 years, plus an interest rate that will make you despise every cent you ever handled. I do not possess that level of capital. You now control the shipping lanes. Then you had better devise a solution. Be resourceful. Is that not what you advised Serafina when you sold her? That desperate times demand significant sacrifices?" Dominic began walking toward the exit. "Now you will discover precisely how that feels. Wait." Aldo's voice was a desiccated whisper. "My other daughters, my younger ones, the protection you guaranteed them remains in effect, does it not? Unlike you, I do not hold children accountable for the sins of their father." Dominic paused by the door. "But let us be perfectly understood. That protection extends only to them. If you step out of line, create any trouble, or even consider approaching Serafina without my express consent, our subsequent conversation will be of a very different nature. She is my daughter. She was your daughter. She is now my wife. And I, in contrast to you, intend to treat her as something more than a line item in a business transaction. He left Aldo sitting there, immobilized, his expression a mixture of fury, terror, and perhaps the faintest trace of shame. Victor remained silent until they were back inside the elevator. "Do you feel improved?" "Not in the slightest." Dominic jabbed the button for the ground level, but it was an action that had to be taken. "So what is the strategy concerning her?" "Concerning Serafina, I have absolutely no idea." "You have developed a vulnerability for her? I barely know the woman, but you have a concern for her. Or at a minimum, you do not wish for her to be harmed, which in your sphere of existence is functionally the same thing." Dominic offered no reply, because Victor's assessment was accurate. Some element of Serafina had penetrated his defenses, compelling him to question principles he had accepted for decades, compelling him to desire to be someone else entirely. The true dilemma was whether a man such as him was even capable of transformation. Could an individual who constructed his entire existence on violence and fear ever become someone a shattered girl could learn to trust? He possessed zero solutions, only more questions that grew heavier with each glimpse of the pain in Serafina's eyes. Her every recoil from his presence was a testament to her trauma. Each attempt at composure a fragile facade he effortlessly pierced. Upon Dominic's return to the penthouse, Serafina occupied the kitchen once more. This time, a meal had been produced. Pasta with a commercial sauce, a salad assembled with more will than expertise. She stood with her back to him, her movements mapping the confines of this new, gilded prison. "That smells exceptional," she startled, spinning with a wooden spoon brandished like a shield. Recognizing him, a measure of tension eased, yet the wariness in her gaze remained a constant. "I prepared a meal. Unsure of your return, I just—" Her motion indicated the stove. "It is sufficient for two, should you be hungry." "That was not a requirement of you." My hands required an occupation. Victor acquainted me with the kitchen's layout. She returned to the stove, stirring the contents of a pot without purpose. He possesses a surprising gentleness for a man who appears capable of tearing a directory in two. He can be. Dominic loosened his tie as the day's weight settled deep within him. "What was the subject of your conversation?" "Primarily literature. He observed my interest in your library and began suggesting authors. I would never have identified him as a reader. Few people do. They perceive only the scars and his stature, assuming that is the entirety of his narrative." Serafina placed the spoon aside, serving the food with deliberate, measured motions. "Is that how you are perceived as well? Do they see only the monster and believe that is the whole of you?" The inquiry caught him unprepared. I rarely concern myself with the opinions of others, but not never. She presented him with a plate, her gaze averted. "If you were entirely indifferent, you would not have disclosed the truth about the money, about my father. You would have allowed me to persist in the lie I already accepted. Perhaps I simply needed you to understand the true nature of your father, or perhaps you needed me to see the man you aspire to become." She finally met his eyes. "So which is it?" Dominic accepted the plate and moved to the table. "I do not yet know." They consumed their meal in a weighted silence. The pasta was basic, yet it was sustenance. The gesture of its creation held more significance than its flavor. Beyond the windows, the sunset painted the sky over the Hudson with strokes of orange and crimson. I spoke with my mother today. Serafina's voice was scarcely audible. I utilized the phone in your study. I trust that was acceptable. It is your phone as well. You require no one's permission. Ingrained habits. She prodded the food on her plate. I called to inform her I was adjusting, that everything was satisfactory. What was her response? She inquired if I was fulfilling my side of the agreement, if I was ensuring your happiness, if I had... Serafina's voice fractured. If I had performed the duty she instilled in me for years, the one a wife performs on her wedding night? Dominic lowered his fork. And what was your reply to her? I fabricated a story. I told her everything transpired as she had orchestrated, that I was performing the role of a good wife. She looked up, her eyes glistening with tears of pure indignation. I could not tell her the reality. I could not bear to confess that my own husband has shown me more deference than my mother ever has, that the monster I was conditioned to fear is the sole person who has cared to ask what I desire. Serafina, she sold me as well, do you not see? She framed it as a necessity for our family, as my destiny. But she stood beside my father and persuaded me this was some noble forfeiture. All that time, she was molding me to be, she gagged on the word, to be utilized. That was the ultimate purpose of all her instruction. How to endure it, how to be silent and unseen and compliant, how to survive as someone's possession. My apologies. Do not be. You are not the one who orchestrated this. You are merely the one who now holds the deed. She rose sharply from her chair and began clearing the table, though Dominic had not yet finished. My mother asked when I would visit, to bring my new husband to meet the family. She wishes to display me tangible evidence that her great sacrifice was profitable. You are not obligated to go. Yes, I am. My sisters remain in that house. I must see them to confirm their well-being. She activated the faucet, her motions sharp with fury. Besides, do you not wish to survey your return on investment? To show the family you now own their daughter? Is that not the protocol for this game? This is not a game, is it not? You entered this marriage to acquire shipping lanes and new territories. Civility does not alter the terms of the transaction. She scrubbed at a dish that was already immaculate. I remain the asset you procured, the price my father was willing to pay. Dominic stood and approached her, maintaining a careful distance. You are incandescent with rage. Of course I am. I am seething. I am. She slammed the plate onto the counter with enough force to crack it. I am so filled with rage I can scarcely draw breath. At my father for selling me, at my mother for abetting him, and at myself for being too paralyzed by fear to refuse. At him for this entire catastrophe, even as he attempts a heroic posture. At everything. She was descending into a vortex. He countered it with a simple decree. Become feral. Shatter something if you must. Her eyes darted to the fractured plate, then back to him, questioning his sincerity. 100%. This is your home now. If destruction brings you solace, then destroy. We can always acquire more plates. She regarded him as if he were unhinged. Perhaps he was, but it was a preferable madness to letting that venom consume her from within. Serafina stared, a visible shift occurring in her demeanor. In a single motion, she seized the plate and hurled it against the wall. It detonated, the violent crash reverberating through the space. She was breathing heavily, viewing the destruction as if in disbelief. A sound tore from her throat, a fractured manic laugh entwined with a sob. Oh my God, she had actually thrown a plate, he inquired. Feel improved? She responded. In fact, yes. That felt. And she laughed again, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. That was extraordinary. He offered her another. She replied, no, but perhaps. The young woman slumped to the floor, encircled by the evidence of her own rebellion. She had never intentionally broken a single thing, never permitted herself such rage, always instructed to internalize it. Be pleasant, do not cause a disturbance. As Dominic retrieved a broom and began sweeping, he delivered a promise. You can unleash a hurricane in here, you can scream, you can break every dish if it brings you peace. And he was sincere, utterly sincere. She observed him clearing away her wreckage, a moment of profound calm in the heart of chaos. She then asked, why are you treating me with such decency? He was direct. I am not a good man. Virtually anyone will affirm that. But with me you are. Why? After disposing of the shards, Dominic leaned against the counter. In truth? I have no idea. Perhaps because witnessing your suffering is a worse compromise than any illicit bargain I have ever made. Or perhaps I tire of my role as the villain. Or perhaps I see you were dealt a cruel hand by fate, and the minimum I can do is not worsen it. She challenged him. Those are all calculated responses. What do you truly want from me? For him to confess an emotional investment? They had known each other for 2 days, but she insisted, you feel something. Otherwise, none of this would signify anything. He knew she was correct. The truth of it resonated deep inside him. For 20 years, this man had systematically excised emotion from his existence. People were instruments. The world was a board game. Now this woman, technically a business acquisition, was reawakening sentiments he had long since buried. He shifted tactics abruptly. Let us establish some parameters. Things you will tolerate, things you will not. Your absolute boundaries. Serafina drew her knees in close. Such as? Physical contact. I understand you do not wish for me to touch you. I will honor that. But for appearances, if we must present as a couple, may I place a hand on your back? Or take your arm? She had to genuinely consider it. If you give me warning, if I understand it is a performance, I can manage it. But no spontaneous acts, and that is all. No embraces, no kisses, he conceded. Understood. And our domestic situation? Do you desire a separate bedroom? Is that an option? The decision is entirely yours. Yes. She required her own sanctuary, a place to secure the door and exist in total solitude. He replied, It is done. There are 3 vacant rooms. Choose one and we will transfer your belongings. She appeared completely astonished. It is that simple? It is that simple. Anything further? I must work, or perhaps volunteer. I cannot simply remain here all day, awaiting your return, like some... Her voice failed her, like some trophy. What would you like to do? She had no concept. She had never been permitted to even consider it. Her parents' entire design for her was to marry wealth and become a homemaker. That was the sum of her future. A bitter laugh escaped her. I suppose they succeeded with the marriage part, at least the wealthy part. He asked what she had studied before her world disintegrated. Education. She had harbored a dream of being a teacher for young children. Her entire expression softened. I love children. Their candor, their capacity for wonder, how they perceive everything before the world taints them. His reply was immediate. Then become a teacher. But I lack the degree. I was forced to withdraw when my father's enterprise collapsed. We could not afford the tuition. Finances are no longer an obstacle. Complete your degree, obtain your certification, or volunteer while you deliberate. Dominic produced his phone. My assistant can arrange meetings with various schools. Find one that suits you, she asked. You are not joking? Why would I just about that? You wish to work, so work. Your life did not conclude because you married me. Serafina was looking at him as if he had manifested a second head. This is utterly nonsensical. My own father sells me to a crime syndicate leader who subsequently reveals himself to be a proponent of women's empowerment. He corrected her. I am a proponent of what is advantageous. Your misery and boredom benefit no one. You, pursuing a meaningful life, presents a better image for us both. She categorizes him among the threatening men she has known, concluding he is by far the most unusual. When he inquires about her sample size, she admits it consists of only two, him and her father. Her father's brand of terror, she explains, was not of broken bones, but of a slow, methodical dismantling of the soul. Dominic observes that both methods ultimately leave scars. Affirming this, she rises and composes herself, then asks for permission to pose a personal question. He grants the query, but not a guaranteed answer. She asks about his family, about anyone he holds dear. He briefly considers his Aunt Teresa, the sole relative at their wedding, a single aunt, he states, with whom he speaks perhaps twice a year. That is the extent of it. His parents are gone. His father when he was 19, his mother some years after. She offers her condolences, which he immediately deflects. He clarifies that his father was a monster, defined by alcohol and violence, enabled by his mother's passivity. Their deaths, he states, were not a tragedy for him. This confession prompts Serafina to close the distance between them for the first time. She asks if this shared history of subjugation is why he understands, why he attempts to be different. Perhaps, he concedes, he knows the feeling of powerlessness, of one's life being dictated by another, of being unsafe in the one place meant for sanctuary. His gaze finds hers. He recalls a vow made upon leaving that home to never be weak again, to never cede such control to anyone. She then observes the profound irony that he now wields that same control over her. He acknowledges this truth, stating it is precisely why he is attempting to restrain its use. A constant effort. She presses the point. He possesses the power, should he choose to use it. He knows this to be true. A lie would be pointless. The marriage contract, he explains, grants him an immense degree of legal authority, a detail her father ensured. But she needs to know if he would deploy it. If she angered him or failed to meet his expectations, would he exercise that ultimate power? The word no hangs unspoken, a simple comfort he wishes to offer. Yet his commitment to honesty compels him to acknowledge his own darkness. He cannot say for sure. He hopes he would not, but admits to committing terrible acts for far lesser provocations. He cannot promise a transformation based on words alone. She absorbs this, nodding, her gratitude reserved for his brutal honesty. He had offered the truth, he reminds her, when a simple lie would have been easier for most men. He is not most men. A faint smile touches her lips as she agrees that he is decidedly not. In the following days, a strange new equilibrium establishes itself. Dominic departs early for opaque business she understands is best left unquestioned. She explores the gilded cage of their home in the mornings. Her afternoons are spent on calls to schools, following a surprisingly useful piece of advice from Victor's wife. In the evenings, they dine, sometimes in silence, sometimes with tentative conversations that grow less strained with each passing day. Serafina chose the bedroom at the corridor's end, the one whose windows greet the dawn. Her belongings were moved in at Dominic's unspoken direction. She begins to imprint her presence on the space, leaving books on tables and a jacket on a chair, small markers of life that temper the vast cold rooms. On the fourth day, Marcus arrives without warning. Dominic is in his office when Victor's voice comes over the intercom announcing Chen is here with an emergency. Upon being admitted, Marcus enters, his expression etched with stress. He insists they must discuss the Colombo problem. Dominic deflects, but Marcus is adamant. The Colombos are agitated about the shipping lanes, alleging an encroachment on what was once Vale's territory. It is no longer Vale's, Dominic counters. It is his. This, Marcus explains, is the core of the issue. They had an arrangement with Aldo, a consistent source of income. With that income now gone, they are becoming volatile. A familiar rage begins to surface in Dominic. He is indifferent to their agitation and declares he will not make deals. Marcus warns that a choice may not be possible, short of inciting a full-scale war. Dominic dismisses this, claiming experience with war. But not this kind, Marcus clarifies, his voice dropping, not with a wife whose safety must be guaranteed. The remark strikes a nerve. Dominic moves to the window. Marcus elaborates. They are aware of Serafina. The entire city is aware, and some now view her as a potential vulnerability. While Dominic's retribution for any harm done to her would be absolute, Marcus notes, such vengeance offers no solace after the fact. Marcus approaches, clarifying his intent is not to incite panic, but to restore a calculated mindset. The Dominic of old would have anticipated this, would have prepared a contingency. That version of Dominic, however, was not burdened with such personal attachments. The implication that he was unconcerned with collateral damage prompts a sharp retort. Marcus studies him, perplexed by the shift he has observed since the wedding, a new distraction. Dominic tersely claims the situation is handled. Marcus questions this, suggesting his recent actions are guided by sentiment rather than strategy, a fatal flaw in their world. At that moment, Dominic's phone vibrates, a text from an unknown number. He opens it to a single image that chills him to the bone. A photograph of Serafina, taken from a distance just hours before. The photograph was taken from a vehicle across the street. A message delivered without words. "We have a problem, Niels," he states, showing the screen to Marcus. The message had arrived only seconds ago. Dominic moves like a phantom to the living room, where Serafina is immersed in a book. She looks up into his stormy expression and her own composure falters. "What is it?" she asks. He informs her they must discuss her security detail. When she questions this, he explains she is under surveillance, presenting the photo that had arrived 5 minutes prior. The color drains from her face as she struggles to comprehend who would do this, and why. Because, he explains, his voice a sheath of ice over a core of fury, they understand her value as the lever to be used against him. This new reality, he declares, necessitates a complete overhaul of her lifestyle. "So I am a prisoner?" she asks. He reframes it as a need for constant protection, a team Victor is already assembling. Serafina rises, her book falling to the floor, her voice firm. No. She had just begun to experience a semblance of freedom and refuses to relinquish it. He states the matter is not negotiable. She counters that everything is, reminding him of his promise of choices. That promise, he replies, predated her becoming a designated target. She argues it may not be a threat, but his voice hardens to steel. It is a threat. He recognizes the tactic. The first move in a well-known playbook is to demonstrate access. The next move, he implies, will not be a photograph. From the doorway, Marcus interjects, confirming Dominic's assessment. He's right, Serafina. This is serious. She accuses him of siding with Dominic. Marcus clarifies he is on the side of her survival. He then looks at Dominic and adds that she has a valid point. To confine her is to become a mere reflection of her father. The comparison strikes Dominic with the force of a physical blow. He turns back to Serafina and asks for her proposal. I want to be safe, she says, but I must be a person, not a treasure in a vault. When he asks for a middle ground, she proposes a compromise. Security details when she is out, but freedom from surveillance within the house, a small claim to a normal existence. I will not be a captive in this house, she asserts. Done, he agrees, but Victor's protocols must be followed precisely. You report your movements. You avoid foolish risks. She interprets this coolly. Because my risks are your liability. He counters with an unplanned, raw honesty, because I do not want you to be harmed. The unvarnished sentiment surprises her. Is that difficult to believe? He asks. She stares, admitting that what truly terrifies her is the possibility that he is sincere. His monstrosity is a simple concept, something she can hate without complication. But these glimpses of the man beneath, she explains, drawing her arms around herself, they twist everything. Recognizing the shift, Marcus quietly withdraws to check the perimeter. An oppressive silence descends upon them. Serafina's voice when she speaks is barely audible. She confesses she does not know how to navigate this, how to be his wife, while fearing what he is, how to accept protection that only highlights her status as his weak point. She questions how she can ever trust him when her entire life has taught her not to. He does not offer false comfort. You should not trust me, he advises. Not entirely. I am not a good man. I am attempting to be better for you, but that better may not be in my nature. She finds this less than encouraging. It is the truth, he says. Defeated, she sinks back into her seat. Yes, it is. The ringing of Dominic's phone shatters the fragile moment. Victor, the voice on the line says. We have the vehicle from the image. A traffic camera caught the license plate. It belongs to one of Colombo's lieutenants. Dominic's instruction is simple. Bring him in. Asked whether the acquisition should be quiet or a public spectacle, Dominic's gaze falls on Serafina, fragile, frightened, yet defiant. Loud, he decides. I want it known what happens when they touch what is mine. He ends the call, his eyes meeting Serafina's. She knows what his command implies. You are going to hurt someone, she states. Perhaps kill them, all for a picture. He explains the photograph's true meaning. It was a test of his boundaries, and he must now demonstrate that those boundaries are lethally enforced. She rises, a silhouette against the night. This is your world, she says. Violence and threats. He confirms it with a single word, yes. And now I belong to it. Again, yes. She then asks for a promise. He must swear that his next action is born of absolute necessity, not from rage or a demonstration of power, but for a legitimate reason. Dominic closes some of the distance between them. He explains the calculus of the situation. The photo was a message that she is within their reach, that she is a tool they intend to use. If he fails to respond with overwhelming force, every one of his rivals will view her as a viable target. That, he states, is the reason. He asks if it is necessary enough for her. After a long moment, she gives a slow, pained nod of assent. The grim logic of their situation settled with an unwelcome clarity. To her, this was the grim reality of their shared existence, a correction she felt compelled to make. She invoked the specter of their vows, the contract that bound them. His recollection was a predator's, focused not on words, but on her vulnerability. Yet for her, every syllable was a stone laid in the foundation of her own prison, a nightmare made real. In this moment, she directly confronted him with the truth of her entrapment, a cage constructed from the very measures meant to ensure her protection. Her observation was not one of complaint, but of cold, hard fact. Her life, whether as his wife or not, was forfeit, a leverage point for his enemies, making her guardians her jailers. There is a dark poetry in such a paradox. Serafina's dilemma was not an accusation against Dominic, but an articulation of a profound existential crisis. The feeling of safety had become indistinguishable from the sensation of imprisonment. The buzz of Dominic's phone served as the narrative's catalyst, a summons from the violent world that underpinned their gilded life. A man named Danny Costa was captured. He would not cooperate. Her observation that Dominic was leaving was not a question, but a statement of grim certainty. He was going not merely to question, but to extract answers through the brutal calculus of pain. In her quiet retreat to the window, she offered a final, damning summary of her existence. A prisoner locked within her own safe cage, a fate she declared as profoundly unjust as his. This injustice, he might have argued, was the entire point. As she moved toward her room, she offered a final plea. Not for him to abandon his nature, but to resist finding pleasure in it. She challenged him to maintain a fragment of humanity, to hate the pain he was compelled to cause. The door's click was a verdict, leaving Dominic in the silent wake of a conflict he hadn't realized was being waged. The warehouse in Red Hook stood as a cathedral to ruin, its silence a perfect vessel for screams. There, Danny Costa was presented not as a man, but as a problem to be solved, his battered form a prelude to the main interrogation. His identity was simple, an operative for a rival, Marco Colombo. Danny Costa was a disposable asset, a street-level soldier of little consequence. The question was not who he was, but whose will he represented. His cover story, that this was mere reconnaissance on Marco's part, was immediately dismissed. As Dominic approached, Danny's defiance was revealed as a fragile facade. The man's desperate plea for legal representation was met with derision, a stark reminder that they were operating outside the realm of civil law. In this space, rights were irrelevant. The only existing forces were Dominic's will and the limits of Danny's physical endurance. The choice presented was not between freedom and captivity, but between two different architects of his demise. The invocation of rights was answered with a swift, brutal strike, an act that awakened the methodical predator within Dominic. This was his domain, governed by the language of force. He repeated the essential question: who was the architect of this plot? Under duress, Danny's story fractured, revealing the truth. He was to monitor the girl, Serafina, to map her routines and identify her vulnerabilities for Marco Colombo. The objective was clear. Marco, aggrieved by territorial losses, was preparing a countermove. Danny's subsequent silence was an admission of the deeper truth he dared not speak. The plan was to leverage Serafina to wound Dominic. This unspoken confession earned Danny another blow, a sickening crunch of bone that seemed to ground Dominic in his grim purpose. This violent ritual was a disturbing form of clarity for him. When asked for the timeline, Danny could only offer that it was imminent, that Marco was gathering forces. Victor, Dominic's lieutenant, vouched for the confession's authenticity. With the information extracted, Dominic's order was clinical and absolute. Dispose of him. Danny's panicked reminder of their implicit bargain was met with a cold lesson in semantics. The promise was only for what would happen if he remained silent. No guarantees were ever made for his cooperation. Dominic departed before the final plea could be uttered, stepping into a night that felt like a physical blow. The tremor in his hands was not from fear, but from the toxic cocktail of power and violence, a concoction that left him feeling both omnipotent and hollow. A message from Serafina shattered the moment. Her question, "Did you get what you needed?" was a jarring intrusion of domesticity into his brutal reality. His affirmative reply was followed by another, more disarming query. "Are you okay?" The sheer normalcy of the question was absurd. His terse assurance that he would be home in an hour was met with the promise of dinner, a mundane exchange that underscored the profoundly fractured nature of the life they were forging. Upon his return, her eyes registered the evidence of his work. The bruised knuckles, the vacant gaze. Her instruction was simple, devoid of judgment. Wash up. While he scrubbed the blood from his hands, a futile attempt to cleanse the act itself, she prepared a meal. They ate in a dense silence, a shared space where the violence that funded their lives went unmentioned. She did not inquire about the blood or the warehouse. She did not ask about the fate of the man. Instead, she offered him food, a gesture of normalcy on a day that was anything but. Then, with deliberate lightness, she announced her own move. She had contacted a volunteer coordinator about helping children learn to read in Brooklyn. She confirmed the arrangement was set for the following week, with security logistics already being handled by Victor. She described the woman in charge as wonderfully normal, blissfully unaware of the true identity of her new hire. This anonymity was not a complication, but a profound relief, a brief opportunity to exist simply as Serafina, unburdened by her history or her marital title. She then offered him the same possibility, to be just himself within their home. Her gaze, however, was filled with a tragic awareness as she posed the central question of their existence. Was such a thing even possible, given that violent reality of who he was and what he was capable of? She confessed her struggle to navigate this life without succumbing to contempt for him and for herself. The sight of him returning with blood on his hands made the pretense of normalcy an agonizing exercise. He countered not with a lie, but with the unvarnished truth of his world. He had no intention of pretending to be a man he was not. Her frustration peaked. She admitted she didn't know what she wanted, that she was utterly lost in this violent lifestyle he embodied. In response, Dominic pushed his plate away and delivered a chillingly pragmatic report. The man from the warehouse, who was plotting with Columbo to harm her, had been permanently neutralized. He stated, without a trace of remorse, that he did not regret the act. Serafina absorbed this information with a stillness that spoke of rapid, forced adaptation. Her response was not moral judgment, but a detached analysis. A conventional man would feel regret, but was he a conventional man? No. Therefore, a conventional response could not be expected. As she cleared the table, she drew a fine but critical line. She was not condoning his actions. She could comprehend his brutal logic without ever accepting it. Understanding, she clarified, was not acceptance. She understood the mechanics of his violence, but she would never approve of it, never be at peace with it. What, then, did he want from her? His silence was an admission that he did not know, except for a primal need for her to stop being afraid of him. He sought a truce, a way to render their forced coexistence bearable. What he finally articulated was a request for time to define the nature of their strange contract. She countered with the stark reality they were two individuals bound by an unwanted agreement. But she then echoed his unspoken question. What more could they become? For a moment she held his gaze, contemplating a future that was perhaps merely less painful, less suffocating. She proposed a new strategy: to abandon labels and simply exist, one day at a time. Before disappearing into her room, she offered a final, unexpected acknowledgement. She saw his effort, even when she could not find the right words to meet it. The click of her door was not the sound of defeat this time, but simply the punctuation mark at the end of a day. Dominic remained, caught between the city's electric glow and the internal darkness of his recent actions. He saw a collage of violence and the face of a woman struggling to find humanity in a world he had designed to extinguish it. His empire was built on the unshakable foundation of fear and the complete eradication of weakness. And yet, he now faced his greatest threat, a 22-year-old woman whose gaze held both hope and terror, implicitly demanding that he become a better man. The very possibility seemed remote. Could a man fluent only in the language of violence learn to speak with kindness? Could someone who had spent 2 decades constructing fortifications now dismantle them for a near stranger? He possessed no answers, only hands stained by his trade, an emptiness that violence no longer filled, and a rising fear that Serafina Vale was fundamentally altering him in ways that were more terrifying than any enemy he had ever faced. For a fortnight, they existed within a strange and brittle choreography of avoidance. Serafina found a fragile purpose in her Brooklyn volunteer work, sharing tales of children whose bravery outstripped their literacy. During their dinners, Dominic would listen, feeling a primal instinct to shield the light in her voice, a glimpse of the person she was before his world consumed hers. Victor's security detail operated as specters, their presence a constant, unseen pressure. Serafina learned to mute their existence, an urbanite's skill for ignoring sirens. She was carving a niche of near normalcy inside her gilded cage. But tranquility in their life is merely a pause. The rupture arrived on a Tuesday, when Marcus breached the peace without ceremony. A problem has arisen. Dominic was instantly on his feet. Serafina? No. It concerned her younger sister. An attempt was made on her outside of school. The very air in the room seemed to crystallize. An attempt? Our operatives intervened, but the margin was narrow. Far too narrow. Marcus's expression was carved from granite. This is an escalation. Dominic was already dialing, his movements sharp. Get Serafina secured now and deliver Marco Colombo to me. Boss, taking Marco ignites an open conflict. Then conflict it is. No one touches those children. No one. The call ended. Marcus observed him, his concern palpable. You must consider this. A war. For what purpose? For a 10-year-old girl whose only sin was being born to a coward and whose sister I took as my wife. Dominic seized his coat. This is the precise outcome I warned them of. They probe the boundaries. I answer with overwhelming force. It is the nature of this game. That was the old game. Serafina is now a factor in your calculations. If you declare war, she becomes the primary target. She is already the primary target. The photograph made that clear, and this action against her sister confirms it. Dominic moved toward the exit. The only method to ensure her safety is to instill a fear so profound they would not dare breathe in her direction. Or you could engage in dialogue. Seek a compromise with Columbo. There is no compromise with men who target children, Victor called. Serafina is secure and en route. She has questions. Inform her I will clarify everything upon my arrival. She will not receive this information well. She is already distraught over her sister. Then keep her contained until my arrival. Dominic entered his vehicle as it sped away. And locate Marco. I am indifferent to the means. The journey to the penthouse felt like an eternity. Dominic's mind raced through every contingency, every potential catastrophic failure. He understood this union would create friction, that her family was now his responsibility. But the abstract concept of this danger was a world apart from the visceral reality of a child nearly being abducted. As he entered the apartment, he found Serafina pacing like a caged predator. She turned on him the moment he crossed the threshold. Is Emma safe? I was told she is safe, but I must hear her voice. She is unharmed. She is at your parents' residence, under expanded guard. She is entirely unaware of what transpired. What do you mean, unaware? Someone attempted to abduct her. Our man intercepted them before she was even alerted. To her, it will only appear as if new bodyguards are escorting her home. Nothing more. Serafina became motionless. Guards? 10-year-olds do not have guards. This one does now, as does your other sister. This cannot be happening. She pressed her hands to her temples. This is entirely my fault. I have brought this upon them. No. Your father initiated this when he made commitments he could not honor, when he leveraged you as a pawn to cover his errors and made your sisters instruments of negotiation. Dominic stepped fractionally closer, maintaining a careful distance. You are not to blame for this, but it is occurring because of me, because they wish to strike at you, and they are using my family as the weapon to do it. Correct. And I will ensure this is the final time they ever make the attempt. She stared at him, her eyes a tempest of fear and rage. How? By eliminating more men, by starting a war that endangers more innocent lives, by making it unequivocally clear that certain lines are never to be crossed, and you are the one who determines where those lines are drawn? In this world, yes, I am. Serafina moved to the window, wrapping her arms around her form. I need to see them, not yet, not until I am 100% certain it is secure. And when will that be? When I have dealt with Marco Columbo. Dealt with? She spun to face him. You mean killed. Simply say the word. You intend to kill him, if that is what is required. And what if his death exacerbates the situation? What if his organization retaliates? What if other children are placed in the line of fire? They will not be, not when I am finished. You cannot possibly know that. I understand the mechanics of power. I know that raw, unyielding strength is the only language men like Marco comprehend. To retreat now is to show weakness. To show them you can be broken through your family is to declare open season. Every adversary I possess will see a path to me through the people you love. Serafina stood in a long, heavy silence. I detest that you are correct. I know. I detest that this brutal course of action is the sole option, that we cannot resolve this like civilized people. Marco discarded civility when he dispatched an assassin after a child, as did you. The moment you took your first life, the instant you chose power over morality. She raised a hand as he began to object. I am not defending Marco. I am stating you both function in a reality where children are mere collateral, where fear is an instrument and violence is the only true dialogue. And I am caught in the crossfire. Then what do you demand of me? To let this pass? So she should just wait for them to successfully seize Emma on the next attempt? Impossible. She is completely unraveling. I have no idea what I want. I require my sisters to be safe. I need to cease existing in a state of perpetual fear. In an ideal world, 10-year-olds would not require armed protection. But this is not that world, is it? It is not. So do what you must. Protect them. Protect me. Unleash any violence you deem necessary. Her voice turned to ice. Just do not expect me to pretend. It does not sicken me. Dominic's phone vibrated. It was Victor. We have Marco, and he is demanding to speak. I will be there in 20 minutes. He insists on a one-on-one meeting, neutral territory, only you and him. Boss, that is a trap. Likely. But he claims to possess intelligence. He asserts there is critical information you require before initiating a war. Dominic considered this for a moment. Arrange it. But I want comprehensive surveillance on everything. If he so much as twitches incorrectly, we eliminate him on the spot. He ended the call. Serafina was simply watching him. You are actually going to meet this man? Yes. Is that wise? Not particularly, but I am obligated to hear him out. You mean you need to assess him while you decide whether to put him in the ground? She could already discern his intentions. Yes. Well, in that case, I am accompanying you. Absolutely not. And why is that? 'Cause it is a death trap. Every aspect of this life is a death trap. If I am present, I can witness it for myself instead of remaining here, imagining something far worse. Serafina, this is not a request. I am informing you. I am coming. You want me to understand your world? Then allow me to truly see it. All of it. Not just the sanitized version you believe I can handle. Dominic wanted to refuse, to secure her in the penthouse where she would be safe from harm. But the resolve in her gaze told him she would simply find an alternative way to follow. And perhaps she was right. Perhaps she needed to witness the ugliness to comprehend his actions. Fine, but you will remain in the vehicle with Victor. You will not exit. You will not intervene. You are an observer. Agreed. The meeting was arranged for a warehouse in Queens, an industrial and utterly deserted location. Dominic arrived with Victor and 2 additional guards, Serafina positioned in the rear of the sport utility vehicle. Marco was already present, leaning against a black sedan with 3 of his associates. Stay here, Dominic commanded Serafina, irrespective of what occurs. I will. He exited the vehicle. Marco observed his approach, his expression a perfect void. Virelli, I am glad you could come. You have 5 minutes to explain why I should not simply eliminate you where you stand. Because I am not the individual who targeted your wife's sister. That brought Dominic to a complete halt. You are lying, am I? Consider it. What could I possibly achieve by initiating a conflict with you? You seized my shipping lanes. Yes, I am angered by it, but I am not foolish enough to start a war over a route that was barely profitable. Then who was responsible for the photograph? Who sent Danny after Serafina? Danny was in my employ, certainly, but he was also receiving payment from another party. Someone who needed you to believe I was the antagonist. Someone who desired that we annihilate one another so they could move in and seize control of both our enterprises. Dominic could feel the foundations of his world shifting. Who? Your new father-in-law. Those words struck him with the force of a physical blow. Aldo has been manipulating both sides all along. He made an arrangement with me months ago. I would create problems for you, make you appear weak, and he would grant me access to the lanes after your ascension. He claimed his own daughter would provide assistance from within. Serafina has no knowledge of this. Yes, that is what I am now surmising. Aldo's strategy was a masterwork of layered deception. The intent was to mire you in external conflicts, allowing your marriage to collapse under the weight of your failure to protect her family, thus voiding the entire agreement. He could then dissolve the contract, reclaim his power, and I would be perfectly positioned to seize your territory during the chaos. Dominic's hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. Do you have proof? Marco presented his phone, revealing an entire architecture of betrayal, texts, coordinates, and meeting schedules, all from Aldo's secure channel. He dispatched Danny for that photo, instructing him to frame my organization. Then he staged the abduction attempt on the girl to force you into a war with me. Marco's smile was glacial. The man was prepared to see his own child caught in the crossfire simply to escape your influence. That is a level of coldness that chills even men like us. A white-hot rage began to build inside Dominic. Then why are you revealing this to me? Because I refuse to be a pawn in another man's game, and because Aldo Val is the kind of poison that corrupts our entire enterprise. He must be taught a lesson about final consequences. Marco put his phone away. To be clear, we are not allies. We are not. But our enmity is not a necessity, not because of this. What do you require? I require Aldo to be handled permanently, and I require a small percentage of the shipping routes, just enough to consider the matter settled. Dominic processed the revelation. Every instinct he possessed screamed that this was a trap, that Marco was manipulating him, but the digital evidence was absolute. The logic was perverse, yet it made a kind of horrifying sense. Aldo was precisely the kind of man who would sacrifice his own children to protect his own position. I will consider it. Do not take long. Aldo is already preparing his next move. The next time, it may not be a mere attempt. The next time, one of those children might genuinely vanish. Dominic turned and walked back toward the SUV. Serafina watched him from the darkened window, her face as pale as a specter. He slid into the seat beside her. Drive. Victor accelerated away. They were 3 blocks distant before Serafina found her voice. What did he tell you? Dominic retrieved his own phone, scrolled through his contacts, and located Aldo's name. Your father has been playing both of us, fabricating attacks on you and your sisters to ignite a conflict between Marco and me, attempting to destroy our marriage so he can take back his dominion. No, he wouldn't. He is incapable of that. Dominic showed her the screenshots Marco had forwarded, watching her expression as she read her father's own words, each text a greater betrayal than the one before. Oh my God, her voice shattered. He consented to Emma being taken, to something happening to her, just to be free of me, to break our pact. But Emma, Sophie, they are his daughters. Serafina's hands were trembling violently. What kind of monster gambles with the lives of his own children? The kind who sees them as assets, as pieces to be maneuvered on a board. Dominic took back his phone. I am sorry. Do not apologize for showing me his true nature. I should have seen it. I should have realized when he sold me that his other daughters were equally worthless to him, that none of us were ever truly human in his eyes. What do you want me to do? She looked directly at him. and he witnessed a change in her eyes. Not fear, not vulnerability, but something harder, something colder. I want you to protect my sisters. Genuinely this time. Not from some abstract threat. From him, from our father. That would mean removing him from the situation entirely. I know what it means. Her voice was like granite. He is only going to continue using us. He will continue to place them in danger. As long as he is alive and feels trapped, Emma and Sophie will never know safety. Serafina, are you asking me to? I am asking you to do what you excel at. Neutralize a threat. She locked her gaze with his. I am asking you to kill my father. The words lingered in the vehicle's interior, heavy and irrevocable. Dominic searched her for any sign of hesitation. He was looking for the girl who flinched from his touch 2 weeks prior, but she had vanished. In her place was someone who had been pushed beyond her limits, who had learned that family is not a sanctuary when it is filled with venom. Are you sure? He tried to have Emma abducted. He has been arranging attempts on my life. He sold me and then tried to sabotage the only positive thing that resulted from it. You trying to be a man of your word. Her jaw was rigid. I am sure once this action is taken, it cannot be undone. You will have to live with the knowledge that your husband killed your father. I already live with the knowledge that my father tried to have his own children harmed. This is simply restoring balance. Dominic took out his phone and sent a brief text to Victor. It will be made to look like an accident, a heart attack. Nothing will trace back to you or your sisters. I do not care about the appearance. I only care that they are safe. The car pulled up to the penthouse. They ascended in the elevator in complete silence, the weight of their agreement pressing down on them both. The moment they were inside, Serafina went to the window and stared out at the city. I am a terrible person. Her voice was just above a whisper. I just ordered a hit on my own father, and I feel absolutely nothing. You are not terrible. You are protecting the people you love. By becoming exactly like you. By deciding that violence is the answer. You are not like me. Am I not? I just made the same calculation you make every single day. Weighing lives, deciding who lives and who dies, using force as a solution. She turned to face him. The only difference between us is that you have done this before. The difference is I chose this life. You were forced into it. Does that truly make a difference? The outcome is identical. My father is going to die because I gave the command. It's because I placed his life on the scales opposite my sister's safety, and his was found wanting. Dominic moved closer to her, purposefully leaving a space between them. If you are looking for me to apologize, you are wasting your energy. That is the broken truth about me. I am not changing my mind. I want him gone. My sister has to be safe. I need. She choked on the words. I need this ordeal to be over. And if that transforms me into a monster, then a monster is what I have become. You are not a monster. You are a survivor. Is that the fiction you tell yourself after you have taken a life? When you inflict so much pain and destroy worlds? Are you just surviving? Sometimes. The rest of the time, I am exactly what I have always been. A monster. Yes. She finally faced him, and for the first time in 2 weeks, she breached the divide between them. She was so near he could feel the warmth from her skin, see the golden fragments in her brown eyes. I do not believe you are a monster. You should. I know, but I do not. You have had every chance to hurt me, and you never have. You protected my sisters even when it sent your own life into utter chaos. You are struggling to be a better man, fighting against every lethal instinct you possess. Her hand lifted with a deliberate slowness, giving him a chance to step back before it came to rest on his cheek. I think perhaps you are just a man who was never given another choice. Dominic did not move, her touch a brand against his skin. It was the first time she had initiated contact by choice, not from fear or obligation. The first time she elected to be close instead of maintaining a safer move. Serafina, I am still frightened of you. Some part of me always will be, but I am beginning to understand. Starting to see how the monstrous part and the human part are knotted together, that you can be both a complete savage and surprisingly gentle, a threat and a protector, that maybe no one is simply one thing. What made you reconsider? I realized my father was a greater evil than you, that the man who raised me, my supposed guardian, would have sold his own children for money and power, while you, the boogeyman of my childhood, showed me more kindness in 2 weeks than he showed me in 22 years. Her hand fell from his face. It completely inverted my understanding of a monster. Dominic's phone buzzed, a quiet signal of death. It was Victor with confirmation. It is finished. Val's car left the road on his commute home. It struck a concrete wall. He was gone instantaneously. Clean, just as you instructed. Dominic read the message, the finality of it hardening in his bones like cement. He had taken lives before, ordered hits, executed them himself, and never lost sleep. But this felt different. This was Serafina's father, regardless of the kind of man he was. A line had been crossed with no path back. He held the phone out to her, watched her eyes absorb the text, watched her comprehend that her father was permanently gone, and her choice had been the weapon that had killed him. There were no tears. For a heavy beat, there was only silence, then a single, firm nod. Good! How are we telling my sisters? Your mother will handle that part. She will call you in the morning. The public will believe it was a tragic accident, nothing more. And the funeral? You will go. You will perform the role of the grieving daughter. We must keep up appearances. Appearances? A bitter laugh broke from her lips. My whole life has been one long appearance. Look beautiful, act appreciative, pretend my world was not burning down. I am finished with appearances. What do you want instead? The truth. No matter how hideous it is, no matter how much it pains me. She collapsed onto the sofa. To Serafina, her father was not a figure to be mourned, but a disgusting man who viewed his children as assets. His demise was a predictable outcome for a man who challenged powers he could not match, cloaked in an arrogance that proved fatal. This was the unvarnished truth she would not betray with performative tears. As Dominic took his seat opposite her, their new reality crystallized. He observed that her sisters would be sad. They are young, she noted. Their memory is of a man who never existed. She allows them their grief, a tribute to an illusion. But locking eyes with Dominic, Serafina demanded a starker honesty. Aldo was a monster, she conceded, merely a different species than the man before her. To his query of what kind he was, she replied, the kind who harbored no illusions about his own nature. You make no attempt to sanctify your malevolence with noble justifications, she observed. Your cruelty is transparent, unlike his greed, which he disguised as familial obligation. Drawing her knees to her chest, she confessed a preference for his brand of monstrosity. A profound silence descended as the setting sun cast long shadows of orange and black across the room. Outside, the city's pulse was oblivious to the quiet death of one man, the calcification of a young woman's heart, and a perverse union born of a contract that was slowly solidifying into a genuine alliance. I should feel a greater weight, Serafina whispered at last. I should be shattered. Yet all I feel is liberated. Is that perverse? He replied that he was the last person to consult on morality. Perhaps such concepts do not exist. Perhaps there is only survival and the actions taken to witness another dawn. That is a grim lens through which to view the world, she mused. I am the wife of a crime lord who just orchestrated my own father's execution, she stated. Grim seems entirely appropriate. A faint smile touched Dominic's lips, acknowledging her twisted sense of humor. It appears to be a necessary tool for navigating your world, she said. Our world, he corrected. The possessive pronoun, she realized, was a recurring slip, a sign of her lingering otherness. But this was her world now, for better or worse. There was an echo of wedding vows in her words. Indeed, she mused, those vows. Rising, she moved to the window. Can this arrangement ever function? She wondered aloud. Can we inhabit the roles of husband and wife without the surrounding chaos? Honestly, he said, no. I believe that chaos is the entire premise. We are from fundamentally different spheres. But perhaps we can learn to navigate the tempest together. That hardly sounds romantic, she noted. Our story had no romantic overture, he countered. Why begin the pretense now? She turned from the window to face him, a new softness in her eyes. The strangest element in all this, she began, is that I am beginning to feel a sense of security with you. Not in defiance of the violence, but precisely because of it. I know you would set the world ablaze to ensure my protection, that you would commit monstrous acts. Especially monstrous acts, he affirmed. That is not security, Serafina. That is simply occupying the favored position of a very dangerous man. Perhaps that is all security has ever been, she countered. Being valuable enough to merit protection. Being cared for to the extent that another is willing to become a monster on your behalf. She returned to the couch, closing the physical space between them, a silent measure of the shrinking emotional distance. Thank you, she said, for shielding my sisters, for handling my father, for attempting to make this entire ordeal tolerable. You are thanking me for eliminating your father, he stated, matter-of-factly. I am thanking you for honoring your word. There is a distinction. Dominic simply observed her, this woman who was learning to maneuver through the shadows with a resilience she might once have applied to a gentler profession, finding her equilibrium in a world engineered to shatter her. She held his gaze, seeing both the monster and the man, and recoiled from neither. You possess more strength than I ever perceived, he admitted. I am only just discovering it myself, she replied. When one ceases to fear everything, one realizes a capacity for endurance beyond all imagination. Even for enduring horrors, even for mere survival at any cost. My father, she recalled, always called me weak. Too fragile, too sentimental, too naive. I believe he was mistaken, Dominic said. He was fatally mistaken. Or perhaps, she mused, this strength is emerging only out of necessity, because this life demands it, because you demonstrated that survival requires making the brutal choice. She appraised him. Is that what molded you? Were you once different before the violence reshaped you? I began as someone frightened and weak, he admitted. Violence forged me into something strong. And having seized that power, I vowed never to be weak again. And now I remain strong, I remain dangerous. But for the first time, I have begun to question if that is the sum of my existence. What else would you be? The question hung in the air. Dominic had no answer. He had never entertained an alternative, never conceived of a life beyond constructing his empire, wielding fear as his primary tool in the perpetual game of dominance. But sitting here with Serafina, witnessing her transformation from a pawn into something more resilient, something unbreakable, he felt the first hairline fracture in his worldview. A new possibility emerged, that he could be one who protects without total destruction, who could wield his power for a purpose beyond its own acquisition, someone who might, in time, be deserving of the delicate trust he saw blooming in her eyes. I do not know yet, he said finally, but I am willing to discover it. She reached for him, her hand slowly enveloping his. The gesture was simple yet monumental, the first instance of contact she had initiated that was not born of terror. Then let us discover it together, she proposed. Two broken people attempting to become slightly less so. That must have some value. Dominic glanced at their joined hands, the stark visual of her smooth skin against his scarred knuckles, her hesitant faith against his violent legacy. None of this was logical. The situation was impossible. And yet it was beginning to find its own strange coherence. The funeral was precisely the spectacle Aldo would have desired, ostentatious, theatrical, and attended by a crowd who despised him but appeared nonetheless. Serafina stood between her mother and Dominic, clad in black, her face a perfect sculpture of grief. She was playing a role she had perfected in her father's house. Emma and Sophie wept into their mother's arms, their sorrow authentic and raw, and the sight of their tears coiled something sharp and painful within Serafina. She felt no guilt for her actions, not a shred. The ache was for a phantom father, an ideal that had never truly existed. "Are you all right?" Dominic's voice was a low murmur, meant only for her. "I'm fine. Let us conclude this." After the service, Marcus offered manufactured condolences, calling her father a complicated man. Serafina retorted, "That is one description," feeling no obligation to be diplomatic with someone who knew precisely the kind of predator Aldo was. He observed, "You are managing this with composure." She replied, "I have had a lifetime of practice pretending while my world imploded. This is merely another day." Marcus regarded her with a newfound respect, remarking, "You are more resilient than you appear." Her eyes met Dominic's. "I am learning from the master." Following the funeral, the mourners assembled at her mother's home. Catherine was delivering an award-worthy performance as the bereaved widow, and the audience played their supporting roles. Serafina watched her, contemplating her mother's potential complicity in Aldo's schemes. Later, her mother cornered her in the kitchen. "Serafina, we must discuss your father's estate, the business." "What of them?" "It is all gone. The attorneys report that your husband now possesses nearly everything. The marriage contract granted Dominic absolute control." Catherine's flawless composure finally fractured. "We are left with nothing. The house is heavily mortgaged. The accounts have been drained. He left us ruined." Serafina felt no trace of sympathy. "He received what he was due. You could speak to Dominic, request his assistance." "Assist you? After my father attempted to use me as a pawn to incite a war?" Catherine's face blanched. "What are you saying?" A bitter laugh escaped Serafina. Father was conspiring with Marco Colombo, arranging attacks on Emma and me to sabotage my marriage and reclaim his power. He was prepared to sacrifice his own children to escape Dominic's influence. No, he would not have done that. He did, and Dominic possesses the proof. Serafina stepped closer, her voice crystalline with ice. So, no, I will not ask my husband for a bailout for the family who sold me, then tried to destroy the single positive thing to emerge from that transaction. You are on your own, Mother, precisely as you left me. I was preparing you for your life. You were training me to be a submissive object, a property that would not resist. Serafina's tone was glacial. Oh, I absorbed my lessons well, just not the ones you intended. I learned that family is a fabrication, duty is a cage, and the only individual who genuinely protects me is the man you instructed me to fear. Catherine reached for her, but Serafina recoiled. Do not. You chose Father's side. You taught me to endure when you should have taught me to fight. Now you must live with the outcome. She turned and walked directly back to Dominic, who read her expression instantly. We are leaving. He asked no questions, simply extricating them from the suffocating atmosphere. In the car, Serafina finally exhaled. That difficult? My mother wants money. She expects me to beg you for financial aid because Father left them destitute. And what was your response? That she can resolve it herself. I am finished managing their disasters. Dominic remained silent for a moment. If you wish to provide for your sisters. My sisters are minors. They are protected under a clause in our contract. They will be secure. But my mother, she made her decision. She can face the consequences. You have become hard, he observed. I have become a realist. There is a distinction. She gazed out the window. Besides, I had a capable instructor. I'm not certain if that is a compliment. It was not an insult, it is a fact. She turned to him. Can we just go somewhere else? Not the penthouse. Anywhere but there. Somewhere that isn't contaminated by all of this. Where? I do not care. Just a place where I can breathe. Dominic gave the driver a new location. They found themselves in a park, an ordinary place. They sat on a bench, feigning that they were not the products of violent histories. I keep waiting to feel remorse, Serafina said softly. For my father, for giving the order, but I just feel vacant, as if something is absent, but I do not know what. That is normal. Grief is complicated, even for a person you hated. But is it grief? Or just the silence where the pain used to be? Perhaps it is both. Dominic's gesture, placing his arm along the bench, was a subtle shift in their dynamics architecture. He offers a confession, not of grief, but of relief at his own father's passing. A release from pain. This admission becomes a key, unlocking Serafina's own complex sorrow. She mourns not the man who died, but the paternal archetype she was denied. In this shared void, her posture softens, leaning into his space, questioning if their profound damage precludes any hope for a normal existence. He confirms that normalcy was never their inheritance. She probes further, questioning if escape from their predestined roles is possible. The fantasy she constructs is one of erasure and rebirth, new identities in a place untouched by their violent legacy. Dominic, a man defined by that very legacy, dismisses this as pure fiction. Yet she clings to its beauty. Her question of whether he could shed his identity reveals the core of their conflict. His brutal honesty confirms his entrapment. His entire being is built upon this foundation, and he cannot conceive of a self without it. Yet he concedes that his connection with her has introduced a radical question. Is there a reality beyond the twin pillars of power and fear? Her query, what else is there, hangs between them as a shared unknown. Their quiet observation of an ordinary couple represents a glimpse into a world they can only witness, not inhabit. Serafina then anchors them back to a tangible future, announcing her admission to New York University's education program. For him, this is a positive development. For her, the act of wanting, of planning a future beyond mere survival, is a disorienting experience. She articulates the psychological whiplash of her new reality. A month prior, her sole objective was staving off death. Now she is architecting a future. The feeling is strange, tinged with a hope that feels perilous. Hope, in her world, is an invitation for further loss, a vulnerability waiting to be exploited. He counters that not all things are taken, but her experience argues otherwise. Safety, innocence, people, this life is a relentless thief. Dominic cannot refute this truth. The question then becomes one of posture, passive acceptance of impermanence, or a defiant struggle against it. She posits that perhaps the only meaningful act is to build, knowing demolition is inevitable. The query then turns inward. Are they constructing something together, or merely co-survivors? He deflects, asking for her interpretation. Her assessment is one of careful navigation, of learning to coexist without mutual destruction. Her former hatred has dissolved, replaced by the realization that he is not the monster of her imagination. When asked what he is, she describes a man of complexity, lethal but not sadistic, violent but with purpose, capable of immense darkness but also capable of genuine care. She sees through his strategic justifications, protecting her and her sisters as assets, and identifies the deeper, more vulnerable emotion beneath. It is a weakness he cannot conceal from her. Confronted with her perception, the walls he has maintained for 2 decades crumble. He admits the truth. The shift, he reveals, occurred somewhere within the chaos of their union, between her devastation on their wedding night and her resolve in condemning her own father. In that crucible, she ceased to be a contractual obligation. Her response is dry. That's not very romantic. They concur on their distinct lack of romance, a shared understanding that brings a genuine smile to her face. They are not a fairy tale, but perhaps something more resilient, tailored to their broken reality. In the ensuing weeks, their cohabitation finds a new rhythm. The apartment, once a sterile penthouse, is warmed by the intellectual energy of Serafina's university studies. She returns filled with discussions of pedagogy and the children she tutors, bringing an outside world into their gilded cage. Dominic's role begins to shift from silent observer to active listener. He finds himself captivated not by business intelligence, but by her burgeoning passion. This marks a fundamental turning point. The office, his seat of power, now feels sepulchral, and he leaves early not from obligation, but from a desire to be in her presence. He inquires about her day with genuine interest. Then, approximately 6 weeks after Aldo's funeral, Serafina appears at his study door, proposing a quiet companionship while he works. Her room, she explains, feels too empty. He grants her silent request. She settles onto the couch, and a comfortable quiet fills the space between them. An hour passes, and he finds her asleep, the book resting on her chest, her expression unguarded, in a way it never is when she's awake. The logical course of action is to wake her. Instead, he covers her with a blanket. and her mere presence transforms the cold office into a sanctuary. He, too, falls asleep on the opposite couch, a silent guardian. When she awakens, she finds him there. Her question about why he stayed receives a simple, profound answer. He did not want her to be alone. This admission strikes her as the kindest act she has ever received. He dismisses it as a low standard, and she agrees with a faint smile, accepting the gesture. From this point, the final barriers between them begin to disintegrate. Small gestures of intimacy, his hand on her back, her closer proximity at dinner feel natural. Even her laughter, a rare sound, begins to surface in response to his dark humor. He becomes immersed in her world as they carefully construct a shared existence. But their reality is predatory and unforgiving. The inevitable intrusion arrives via a Tuesday phone call from Victor, his voice taut with urgency. A warehouse in Red Hook has been hit, leaving 2 men dead and $500,000 in product gone. As Dominic prepares to leave, Serafina confronts him with a fear that is now personal. She challenges his illusion of invincibility, demanding not recklessness, but genuine caution. The intensity in her eyes compels his sincere agreement. The warehouse is a scene of clinical execution. The victims are covered, the surveillance erased. This was the work of professionals, not common thieves. Dominic's immediate question is one of attribution. Victor confirms their assessment. The attack was surgical, predicated on inside knowledge of their security protocols. The perpetrator had to be one of their own. 15 minutes later, Marcus arrives, articulating the strategic danger. A loss of this magnitude projects an image of weakness. The imperative is clear: find the traitors and make their punishment a brutal deterrent. The order is given to fortify all operations and trust no one. For 3 days, Dominic immerses himself in the underworld, chasing down leads. The revelation when it comes is a visceral betrayal. The traitor is Tommy Riachi, a man who had been with him for 8 years. Tommy was considered a loyal soldier, one of the few men Dominic trusted implicitly. He demands confirmation. Victor presents surveillance footage of Tommy meeting the buyers. The motive, it appears, was a loan request Dominic had denied 6 months prior. He vaguely recalls the incident. Tommy's daughter required an expensive, experimental treatment for a rare illness. Viewing the request through a cold financial lens, Dominic had deemed it a poor investment and dismissed him. The consequence of that decision was now stark: theft and the murder of 2 loyal men. The Dominic of the past would have ordered an immediate and public execution. Now, however, something gives him pause. He asks for Tommy's location and goes to see the man himself, finding him beaten and broken in a damp basement. At the sight of his boss, Tommy's composure shatters into desperate apologies. Dominic cuts through them, demanding to know if he thought he would escape consequence. Tommy explains his desperation over his dying daughter. The treatment cost $300,000, and with his request for help denied, he felt he had no other recourse. He admits his wrongdoing, but frames it as the act of a father unable to watch his 8-year-old child perish. The confession lands like a blow. A month earlier, Dominic would have ended him without a second thought. But now he sees Serafina's face, understanding the terrible choices made by people cornered by fate. "You should have approached me again," articulated the situation. "It was a crisis. I made 3 attempts. Your aide insisted you were unavailable." The admission lands with the force of a physical blow. Tommy had made the effort. His options exhausted, he had resorted to a desperate measure. "The men you eliminated, they had lives." "I am aware," Tommy rasped, his voice a ghost. That is a burden I carry forever. But my child was fading, and she was my entire world. Dominic retrieved his phone and initiated a call. What is the cost for the treatment Tommy Riachi's daughter requires? 300,000. Transfer the full amount to the medical center today. Tommy could only stare, bewildered. What is this? Your daughter receives her care. You retain your life, but your time here is over. You will vacate this city. You begin anew with no return. If I perceive your presence in my territory again, I will conclude what I began this evening. Is that clear? I fail to. Why? Because I aspire to be different from the man I once was. Because my wife taught me that clemency is not synonymous with weakness. Because you are a father who made a terrible decision to protect his child, and I cannot condemn that without becoming the very monster of their perception. Dominic gestured to Victor. Release him. Ensure he and his family are gone by dawn. Boss? Simply execute the order. Victor complied, but his expression conveyed that Dominic had finally fractured, and perhaps he had. In their reality, compassion was likely just another term for insanity. But Dominic was weary of being a man whose sole gift was destruction. Arriving home that night, he found Serafina waiting. She read his expression and understood instantly that something had been shattered. Explain? And so he did. He recounted the story of Tommy, the disloyalty, and the decision he made. She listened, her gaze fixed on his, and upon his conclusion she crossed the space between them and encircled him in her arms. It was the first time she had ever initiated such contact, the first time she extended comfort rather than merely accepting his protection. For a moment, Dominic remained rigid, stunned, before he tentatively, carefully returned the embrace. You made the correct choice, she murmured against his chest. Did I? I allowed a traitor who stole from me to walk away. Who ended my men? That does not make me right. It makes me vulnerable. No, she countered. It makes you human. It makes you a man who comprehends that people are not just assets and liabilities, but broken, desperate beings striving for survival. She leaned back just enough to meet his eyes. It makes you someone I believe I could truly love. In time. The word, love, lingered in the air between them, immense and formidable. They had never voiced it, never approached it. But there it was, tentative, genuine. In time, he echoed, his tone raw. I am not there, not yet. I'm still deciphering you, still trying to determine if this is authentic, but I think it could be. One day, if we continue on this trajectory, if you remain this person, not the one you were sculpted to be. What if I mismanage this? What if that madman returns for another confrontation? Then he will answer to me, but I am wagering he will not. I observe your transformation, perhaps not instantaneous, perhaps marked by errors, but it is sufficient for me to envision a future beyond mere existence. Dominic drew her close again, feeling her yield to him. I have no concept of what I am doing, he confessed. How to exist with someone, how to care without viewing it as a weakness. I do not either. So we will learn it in unison. We will err, and then we will mend it. Then we will discover new ways to err. It is the human condition. But what if I cause you pain? Not in a physical sense, but with the essence of what I am. Then I will be hurt, and we will navigate it. But you are already trying with more effort than anyone in my life ever has, and the effort is more valuable than perfection. There in the center of the room, they simply held one another, two fractured beings discovering how to become whole in tandem. This was no fairy tale, no storybook romance for the naive, but something visceral, authentic and erected on a foundation more resilient than any fantasy. The contract that had initiated everything was forgotten in some drawer, its legal terminology a faint memory. What they were constructing now was not composed of ink, but of pure volition. A difficult, chaotic, and exquisitely imperfect decision. In the subsequent months, they continued to build. Serafina earned her degree, then her teaching credential, securing a position at the school where she had once been a volunteer. She would return home, spent but radiant, adorned with glitter and ink, to tell Dominic of 6-year-olds who had finally decoded their first words. As he listened, a pride for her swelled within him, entirely distinct from any notion of possession. He undertook the colossal project of pivoting his enterprise without abandoning it entirely. He was not naive enough to believe he could simply sever ties with that world, but he began to redirect its purpose, channeling funds from illicit ventures to legitimate ones, wielding his influence as a shield rather than a cudgel. The entire endeavor was a gradual, brutal conflict against relentless adversaries. Yet Victor remained steadfast, and Marcus helped navigate the harsh transition. Incrementally, the organization began to resemble less a syndicate and more a flawed but potent instrument for good. For a period when Catherine's life spiraled, they had Serafina's sisters reside in the penthouse. Emma and Sophie inundated the immaculate apartment with boisterous, adolescent energy, and Dominic was surprised to discover he appreciated the clamor. He was drawn into assisting with homework, learned the absurd theatrics of junior high, and assumed the role of the uncle they desperately lacked. When Catherine ultimately reached her nadir, intoxicated, broken, and utterly isolated, it was Serafina who extended mercy. It was not absolution, nor was it a reconciliation, but it was enough to guide her into a treatment program. It was enough to preserve her life. In their sphere, that was the nature of mercy, not erasing the past, but simply refusing to enact total obliteration. 1 year following their wedding, the nuptial agreement was scheduled for review. The attorneys placed it before Dominic, replete with clauses for renewal and amendment. He gazed at the documents, his mind reeling with all that had transpired since he had first affixed his signature. Then he tore it into shreds. His legal counsel observed him, utterly aghast. "What are you doing?" The action effectively nullified every single provision, terminating the contract. "The shipping routes, the territory, they are mine with or without her. I do not require a document to maintain what I have built." Dominic rose from his seat. "Prepare the dissolution paperwork, a clean separation." "You are divorcing her." "I am presenting her with a choice. She was never afforded one before. She will have one now." He returned home that evening with the papers in his briefcase. He found Serafina at the kitchen table, engrossed in grading assignments. She looked up as he entered. "You appear grave. Is something amiss?" "Nothing is amiss, but we must speak." He placed the documents on the table. "Our marital agreement was due for review. I have nullified it." Her face became utterly devoid of color. You wish to terminate this?" "No, I am vesting you with that authority. The contract that ensnared you is void. You are at liberty to depart should you wish. There will be no conditions, no retribution. Your sisters will remain protected. You will be provided for. But you will be liberated." Serafina looked at the documents as if they were venomous. "Why are you taking this step?" "Because the decision was never in your hands. Your father bartered you away. And while we have fashioned something positive from it, it began without your consent. Now the choice is yours. You can opt to remain or you can opt to leave. Whichever course you choose, it will be entirely your own. And if I depart, then you depart. I will not impede you. I will not create hardship. You have earned the right to govern your own life. She lifted the papers, her gaze sweeping over the legal phrasing. Dominic merely observed her, witnessing the silent conflict that raged within as she considered the freedom he was offering. Finally, she set them down. I will not be signing these, Dominic. Her tone was resolute. I am not signing them because I do not desire a divorce. I desire to remain here, not because a document dictates it, but because it is my choice to do so. Because what we have constructed is important to me. Because you are important to me. She rose and moved around the table until she stood directly before him. I love you. I cannot pinpoint the exact moment it began. Perhaps somewhere between you dismantling my father's world and you sparing Tommy Ritchie. But it is true. I love you. And I choose to be your wife. Not your captive, but your partner. Dominic felt a final internal bastion crumble, a defense he had not even realized remained. I love you too, he confessed. I have no idea how to navigate this correctly. I will likely fail at it constantly, but I love you more than I ever believed possible. It was then that she kissed him for the first genuine time. Not the hollow performance from their wedding, but a kiss forged from a powerful decision. He answered it with a gentle reverence, holding her as if she were something sanctified, not as if she were a possession he owned. When they finally separated, she was weeping. They were tears of elation this time, not of terror or grief. So this is our course, truly selecting one another. If you will accept me, he said, understanding that I am still a man of danger, and that a part of me always will be. I am not in search of a saint. I am asking for you, all of you, the fractured parts and the parts attempting to heal. That is all I want. Then that is what you shall have. They stood in the kitchen, encircled by schoolwork and legal forms destined to remain unsigned. Two individuals who began as a cold transaction had somehow discovered a path to authenticity. It was not the narrative anyone would have composed for them. Their bond bore no hallmarks of conventional romance. It was a territory they claimed for themselves. It was chaotic and difficult, built upon a foundation of unvarnished truth instead of curated lies. That night marked a crucial turning point. Serafina, for the first time since the wedding, did not retreat to her room. She instead led Dominic by the hand to a chamber that would henceforth be theirs. What unfolded was measured and gentle, steeped in the trust they had spent a year forging. Imperfection remained, echoes of her old terror surfaced, and he still had to consciously temper his own instincts. But its reality, its chosen nature, made it infinitely more precious than any flawless illusion. Later, her voice emerged from the darkness as she lay beside him. Do you have regrets concerning the contract, our beginning? Dominic considered her query with unflinching candor. My regret is for its cost to you. The fear, the stripping of your autonomy, all that you endured at your father's hand. Yet I cannot lament the path that led to this moment. Without it, I would never have discovered this. I would never have discovered you. And I, you, she replied softly. As horrific as it was, I find I cannot regret it, for it made me resilient. A person who understands her own desires and will contend for them. One who can embrace a complex, perilous man without being consumed. Is that what this is? Your embrace of a perilous man? That is precisely it. and you are embracing a woman who has cultivated her own peril. It appears to be our shared talent to fortify one another, never to diminish." "Yes," he affirmed, "it is." They found slumber in a shared embrace, and for the first time since their union, that slumber was deep and untroubled. The night was devoid of phantoms or encroaching fear, offering only the placid solace of two individuals who had chosen each other against formidable odds. The subsequent years presented their own crucible. The echoes of Dominic's past were persistent. Old adversaries, unsettled debts, the perpetual menace inherent to his world. Yet they confronted these forces as a unified entity. Serafina adapted, applying the same resolve she wielded in education to his treacherous sphere. He, in turn, discovered how to place her well-being above his appetite for dominance. Their conflicts were frequent, part of the process of mapping their individual territories and communicating through adversity. Emma and Sophie were raised in a cocoon of love and security, shielded from the grim realities of Dominic's profession and their own father's machinations. From the sisters' perspective, the new reality was simple. Serafina was thriving, Dominic had become kin, and a novel sense of security had finally taken root. The Don initiated a sweeping restructuring of his enterprise, an effort to cast the veneer of legitimacy over his operations. Complete purification was impossible. Some shadows are too deep to be expunged, but the endeavor was significant enough to grant him peace, and for Serafina to witness a man striving for ascent rather than a beast content in the abyss. On their 5th anniversary, Dominic orchestrated a return to the very park they visited, following her father's burial. They settled on the same bench, observing the water, 5 years having passed, their inner landscapes irrevocably altered. Serafina then posed a question. "Do you recall our conversation in this place? You inquired if I would ever vanish to begin anew elsewhere. And would you? Today?" Dominic genuinely weighed the possibility. "No, not any longer. This is our reality. It is flawed, chaotic, and often perilous, but it belongs to us. I have no desire to flee from it. My aim is to continue shaping it into something more." "As is mine." She rested her head on his shoulder, an act of intimacy unthinkable on that first harrowing night. "We managed well, didn't we? For two people whose beginning was a cold transaction. We exceeded well. We constructed something authentic from the ruins of a nightmare. That is a monumental achievement." "No," she breathed. "It is, in fact, everything." They remained until dusk, mirroring their vigil from 5 years prior. But upon leaving this time, they were returning home together, not to a place of confinement, but to a life they had deliberately crafted, a union born of ink now inscribed upon their very beings. Their conclusion, it must be noted, was no cinematic fantasy. There was no magical resolution, no idyllic narrative, only two fractured individuals learning the grammar of love amidst the debris of their histories. They took a pact conceived in terror and transmuted it into a freely chosen, deeply held alliance. Within a system predicated on dominance, brutality, and faithlessness, such a reversal represents the most radical assertion of power imaginable. Dominic Varley had constructed his existence upon a brutalist philosophy. Strength was the sole currency, compassion a fatal flaw, and emotional connection a strategic vulnerability. Serafina Vale, conversely, had navigated her life convinced of her instrumental worth, equating survival with invisibility and love with inevitable suffering. The collision of their worlds served as a powerful refutation of these beliefs. They discovered that authentic power lies in vulnerability, that clemency demands a greater fortitude than cruelty, and that genuine love is an act of total perception. It is the practice of observing another's darkest impulses and most desperate maneuvers, and choosing them nonetheless. The marriage document that initiated their story is now a meaningless artifact, rendered obsolete. Their union, however, stands firm, its strength derived not from obligation, but from mutual desire. And the singular choice, renewed daily through countless small gestures and significant trials, possesses a value that no legal instrument could ever hope to quantify.
Life lesson: the heart does not heal when fate becomes kind. It heals when a person dares to choose differently inside a cruel world. Night enters Dominic Varley's life the way it always does, dressed in expensive black, carrying the smell of oak, whiskey, and old threats. The city glows beneath him like a kingdom of restless fires. Manhattan does not sleep. It watches, it bargains, it remembers. And on the evening of his wedding, it seems to him that the whole skyline is holding its breath. He has stood in rooms full of men who feared him. He has watched rivals swallow their pride like broken glass. He has built an empire out of signatures and bruises, alliances and funerals. The world knows the name Dominic Varley the way old churches know confession, not warmly but intimately. Men speak it in lowered voices. Women learn to read its weight in the faces of the men around them. It is the kind of name that arrives before the man does. And yet, for all his mastery over fear, he is unprepared for the sight of a bride who enters the room as if walking toward her own burial. Seraphina Vale is pale in the soft light, almost translucent, a young woman made spectral by dread. White flowers surround her like witnesses who cannot intervene. Her hands tremble around a bouquet she does not remember being given. When her father grips her arm, she does not move like a daughter. She moves like a sentence being carried out. In that instant, the wedding ceases to be a negotiation and becomes something older, sadder, almost mythic. It is no longer the joining of houses. It is sacrifice. It is Iphigenia led to the altar while the men argue about weather and war. The first lesson hides there quietly in the flicker between candlelight and conscience. A life built on strategy can still be undone by one honest human expression of fear. Dominic has signed every paper, the terms are complete, the alliance is profitable. And still, one look at Seraphina's face rearranges the moral furniture inside him. This is the cruel beauty of truth. It does not always arrive as revelation. Sometimes it arrives as a flinch, a turned cheek, a silence too long before I do. A girl taught to surrender so thoroughly that even her body seems to apologize for existing. Back at the penthouse, the city is all glass and cold angles, steel, shadow, reflections. It is the sort of home a man builds when he wants to impress strangers and keep intimacy out. The windows are too large, the furniture too exact, the silence too rehearsed. Seraphina stands inside it like a misplaced prayer. She has been told what this night means. Her mother, with all the tragic efficiency of women who survive by cooperating with cruelty, has trained her for endurance. Be still, be useful, be compliant. In another century, the lesson would have sounded medieval. In this one, it sounds civilized. That is what makes it more dangerous. She waits for violence because love has never arrived without conditions. And Dominic, standing several feet away, feels something impossible stir in him. Shame. Not the loud shame of public humiliation, but the private, unbearable kind. The kind that comes when a man sees himself reflected in someone else's terror and cannot look away. This is where the second lesson emerges. Heavy as rain over the Hudson, the soul begins to change the moment power stops feeling like triumph and starts feeling like theft. He does not touch her. He does not claim what the contract permits. He does something far more difficult. He leaves. He gives distance. He lets silence remain unbroken. This is not romance, not yet. It is restraint, which in men like Dominic is rarer than passion and more meaningful than apology. Days pass. Morning light enters the penthouse with a gentleness neither of them trusts. Seraphina moves through the rooms like a person learning the geography of captivity. Dominic watches her try to cook, try to compose herself, try to fail gracefully. When the panic attack comes, it arrives without elegance. Breath fractures, words collapse. She folds to the kitchen floor with all the fragile violence of someone who has been carrying too much for too long. The room narrows, air becomes memory, fear becomes weather. He kneels a safe distance away. No declarations, no touching, only breath slowed down into instruction. Sometimes cinema lies to its audience about healing. It presents healing as a speech, a kiss, a dramatic confession beneath rain-soaked music, but actual healing is often smaller, stranger, almost embarrassingly plain, a voice that does not demand, a hand that does not reach too quickly, a night in which nothing is taken, a closed door that remains closed. That is the third lesson. Trust is not born from grand gestures. It is built from repeated evidence that one's boundaries will survive contact with another person. Then comes the father's betrayal and with it the death of illusion. Money changes shape when a daughter sees the number attached to her own body. $3 million, shipping percentages, future revenue streams, the arithmetic of abandonment. Seraphina reads the contract and discovers that love was not merely weak in her father, it was outbid. Something in her breaks, yes, but something also clears. Her grief is not only for the father she has lost, it is for the father she never truly had. There is a particular tragedy in mourning an illusion. No funeral teaches a person how to bury a falsehood. Still, clarity gives birth to will, and will gives birth to choice. She asked for her sisters to be protected. She asked for the money to be turned back against the man who sold her. She stopped speaking like a victim and began speaking like a witness. There is steel in her voice now, but it is not Dominic's steel. His was forged in force. Hers is forged in recognition. She has looked at the architecture of her suffering and learned how it was built. And Dominic, watching her, begins to understand that strength does not always enter a room with a weapon. Sometimes it enters exhausted, trembling, and finally unwilling to lie to itself. By the time she touches his face for the first time, the gesture feels almost liturgical. Not because it absolves him, it does not, but because it acknowledges complexity. She sees the scars, the danger, the blood memory inside him. She sees, too, the part of him trying to become something other than his own past. It is not redemption. Redemption is too complete a word. It is movement. That is enough. This is the fourth lesson. People are not transformed by love because love is magical. They are transformed because love forces them to confront the self they can no longer bear to remain. Years later, when contract dissolves into choice, when marriage becomes something no paper could have commanded, what remains is not innocence. Innocence does not survive stories like this. What remains is something more adult, more costly, and perhaps more beautiful: chosen tenderness. Serafina does not love Dominic because he is harmless. Dominic does not love Serafina because she is dependent. They love one another because each has seen the worst architecture of the other's world and still made room for one more possibility. And that is the final lesson, whispered like the river beneath evening light. Fate may trap people together, but only choice can make them stay with dignity. In cruel worlds, that choice is not soft, it is heroic. It is the quiet defiance of two damaged souls who decide that what made them does not get the final word.